acknowledge a man whose words make your blood boil, who's standing center stage and advocating at the top of his lungs that which you would spend a lifetime opposing at the top of yours. You want to claim this land as the land of the free? Then the symbol of your country cannot just be a flag. The symbol also has to be one of its citizens exercising his right to burn that flag in protest. Now show me that. Defend that. Celebrate that in your classrooms. Then you can stand up and sing about the land of the free. I've known Bob Rumson for years, and I've been operating under the assumption that the reason Bob devotes so much time and energy to shouting at the rain was that he simply didn't get it. Well, I was wrong. Bob's problem isn't that he doesn't get it. Bob's problem is that he can't sell it. We have serious problems to solve, and we need serious people to solve them. And whatever your particular problem is, I promise you, Bob Rumson is not the least bit interested in solving it. He is interested in two things, and two things only: making you afraid of it and telling you who's to blame for it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you win elections.
All right, we're just getting this live started, just kicking it off here on TikTok and on YT. So thanks for tuning in as we get more people to join. Today's topic, I think, is going to be a lot of fun to reflect on. I think I'm going to be able to give everyone a tremendous amount of insight to what our world could have looked like and how one event shaped our world today and continues to shape our world every single day. Currently, this is not something that just happened 26 years ago. This is something that affects me, you, and everyone literally in the world in incredible amount of geopolitics. And that is JFK Jr.'s plane crash on July 16th of 1999. So we're going to do a little story time in today's live. I'm just going to wait for more people to join. And if you're Gen Z, you probably don't know much, if anything, about JFK Jr. If you're millennial, you're probably still too young and you don't realize the connecting of the dots, the ripple effect, if you want to call it, the ripple effect of JFK Jr.'s passing when he had a plane crash, and I'll talk about that in a moment, in 1999, to how that affects each and every one of us today. Oftentimes, thanks Orwell Fighting Fascists, I've talked about this a couple times, and each time I think about it, I go deeper and deeper, and it's astonishing how this one person dying affects all of us. Normally, if one of us passes, the world moves on and continues and nothing really changes. But sometimes when someone dies, it has a ripple effect that goes on for decades and decades and possibly even generations. And that is what happened here in July 16th of 1999. So as we're getting more people in here, I hope you stick around, because I think the story is going to open up a lot of people's eyes to how this event that happened in 1999 led us to where we are today in our political system. I think it's mind-blowing personally. It's astonishing. I'm not saying it absolutely would have happened, but I'm saying it's a 99% chance or a 90+% chance that if JFK Jr. did not die, our world and our division between the right and the left would be very, very different today than it is. And you can tell me, and we're going to do a Q&A afterwards if anyone wants to join in. You can ask questions about it. You may know about JFK Jr. You might have even some more additional insight that I might not cover during this story. And maybe if you're Gen Z or millennial, you don't really understand how one event like this changes the world and changes your life dramatically, not just on the side, like just a little bit. Each and every day, our lives are being affected by the death of JFK Jr. And I know that sounds large, for lack of a better word, but it's not. It's not over embellishing whatsoever. And when you hear the story, you'll realize I think you realize that I'm not over embellishing this story whatsoever, because when you connect the dots, what would have likely happened and what was going to happen was pretty much known to what was going to happen in his life in the future and where he was headed. Then you'll understand how it affects Clinton, Obama, Trump, our current politics, Citizens United, and so much more. So this is really interesting in my mind. Apparently, there's not enough people sticking around. I hope people will stick around and more people will understand this story. I'm going to wait just about another minute or so, and I'll read some comments in the meantime. So what would the world be like if JFK Jr. didn't crash his plane and was still alive? That happened on July 16th, 1999. I remember it very well. He was flying over the Long Island Sound, someplace that I know very well. I've also flown over those routes myself personally, so I'm familiar with the route that he took. I've done it myself in my own private planes in the past with friends and family and so forth. So I know the story really well. I know the area really well. And of course, I'm from the New York area, and I understood the ramifications of Trump and JFK Jr. and so forth. So it's JFK Sr. would have been a Republican today. You know, people say that. Stop with your nonsense. You guys want to say that to sort of people on the right want to claim he would want to be a Republican because somehow the Democrats are so like extreme because they want health care, right? They want health care. You know, I hear that all the time from the right, the nonsense that JFK would have been, like they want to claim JFK wanting to be on the right because obviously Reagan is not looking so good anymore. And so now they want to go claim some of the most popular Democrats as they would be Republicans today. No, JFK Jr. would not have aligned whatsoever with Trump in his worldview today. Not at all. Not a single bit. So can you read flight instruments? Yes, I can read flight instruments, weather, METARs, and all that other aspects of being a pilot. Yes, so I've been a pilot. I actually did also have a interesting moment over coming back from Martha's Vineyard, actually Block Island, over the Long Island Sound in very similar conditions, very, very foggy conditions over the Long Island Sound, because it's very normal between Long Island and Connecticut for the Long Island Sound to get very foggy in the summertime as soon as sun goes down. And it gets very dangerous and very treacherous over that area if you're not a highly qualified pilot and an IFR pilot. So JFK Jr. couldn't read flight instruments. Well, he could read flight instruments, but he wasn't IFR certified. He just didn't have enough time, right? He was a low-hour pilot. And there's something to be said about JFK Jr. flying himself, and we'll get to that in just a moment. So he could read flight instruments, but I've experienced spatial disorientation. It is very weird, very, very strange. And if you don't trust your instruments, you will crash. There's no doubt about it, because it just plays extreme mind games on you when you're not a certified IFR pilot. And even if you are an IFR pilot and you don't have enough time in instrument meteorologic conditions, IMC conditions, you don't realize how quickly things can go badly when you're flying a plane in foggy conditions when you have no horizon out your window. JFK was warned by the guy that sold me. I missed that comment. So thanks for all the likes. And by the way, as we're getting started and more people are joining, please tap the screen as much as possible. And most importantly, I think this live is going to be amazing, if I do say so myself. So please repost this live if you can. Take a second to repost it, because this story is a story that very few people probably have connected the dots and truly understand how it affects your life, my life, our politics, and the world. And it's really important that everyone understands this. And then we'll do some Q&A as well. Thanks, Orwell Fighting Fascists. I saw you on Josh's show this morning. Some great questions there and great insight as usual. I always like seeing you on Josh's show. So thanks everybody else for joining. And if we can get the likes up. And I'm going to do a video on this tomorrow, most likely tomorrow, a shorter video, because obviously this is going to take a few minutes to explain. So if it's on a TikTok video, It's going to take a few minutes to explain, and I hope I can explain it and tell the story where enough people will be interested in it to realize how the ripple effects and how it affects your life today on JFK Jr.'s crash in 1999. So it looks like we haven't been getting a very large audience lately, which is strange. My audience on my follower count continues to go way, way up, and which is awesome on my videos, but my lives, maybe it's just because I'm not debating Trump voters or something of that nature. Maybe this show is not controversial enough, but that's okay. I like doing these lives. I like having discussions with people, and I like sometimes doing stories like this one is going to be today, even if most people don't find it to be that interesting. I just came and I wish I knew what this was with JFK. I'm going to tell you, Teresa, I haven't even started yet. So I was just waiting for more people. So stick around for a few minutes and let me tell you about the JFK Jr. story, because it is super, super interesting and it affects your life and my life and the world today. So I just want to make sure there's enough people in here. And if anyone has any comments or questions, drop them into the comments. And I'm just going to give it 2 more minutes and then I'm going to get started. Hopefully TikTok will send this live out to more people. But maybe this is just not a topic people care about. They should. They really should. If you want to understand the future, you have to understand history. And in this case, you have to understand a very dynamic individual who had an opportunity to change the world for the better and would have almost certainly done so. And I'll explain why I think that is the case. So story time. What would the world look like if JFK Jr. didn't crash his plane and was still alive? How one event changed the course of history. So again, thanks for all the likes and so forth. And there's something I learned about JFK Jr. today that is very much in line with what I'm trying to do on this channel in TK Civics and trying to bring our representation back to the people and make sure we eliminate all the corruption in our government. So if you want to eliminate corruption in government, this is something that JFK Jr. was very passionate about. He had the same vision that I have in terms of how we make sure that our democracy continues to, or put it back on track, and our democracy ends up being what the vision is supposed to be: representation for the people, by the people, government for the people, by the people. Those are not just words. That is something that we should all be living by, and it's really important to understand that. And that's something that JFK Jr. was his focal point of making sure the big money in politics was out of politics. And you'd say that's strange because he comes from a very wealthy family, but you're going to understand a lot more about JFK Jr. in just a moment and how that connects the dots. Okay, so we got a good showing in here. I'm going to get started on the JFK Jr. story. Thanks for sharing this or reposting this live. It's really important. I think, again, like I said, this is oh, cool. That's an awesome hat. Thank you very much for the TikTok hat. Clinton made sure he didn't run. I don't know who you're talking about. Are you talking about JFK Jr.? He was 38 years old when he passed away. And again, thanks for the likes. And just about ready to get started since we have a pretty good group in here. Okay, so is everybody ready? I think this is going to blow you away, seriously, when you realize if you have some understanding. So let's first talk about JFK Jr., who he was. All right, JFK Jr. was the son of JFK, the president who was assassinated in 1963. And JFK Jr. became a household name as a young man because of what he did in front of his father's casket during his funeral procession. And that is the photo right here. This guy, this little tyke right there, this may be the most, at least in terms of American history, the most influential photo taken in the 1900s, so in the 20th century. This photo right here captured the minds of the world, not just America, back in 1963. This is JFK Jr. I should have looked up how old he was. I don't know how old he was. I'm looking right, probably like 3-4 years old, when he saluted his father after his father was assassinated. So that's where the story begins, that JFK Jr. was famous from this photo after his father was assassinated or unalived. I think that's probably the better way to say that. So that happened in 1963. So we're going to speed up time a little bit. JFK Jr. then was pretty much his mother, Jackie Onassis, was very protective over JFK Jr. as a young kid growing up. They lived in New York, and he went to private school. He, of course, comes from the Kennedy family, and he was obviously incredibly famous for that photo, but he was very much protected, and he was raised really well. He ended up being a young adult, of course, living in New York. He was very well known, but he was very private, except when he wanted to come out and do interviews and so forth. But his mother made him sure that he was, very careful with his private life. He was a really good-looking guy, and this is him right here and his wife, right there. And he was really, let me just get to some of my notes. All right. So he was a really striking man. He had an incredible charisma. He was very popular. So this guy was very popular with both the right and the left. So his father, of course, was a Democrat, but he was not unpopular with the Republican Party. He had enormous charisma. He was never embroiled in any major scandals growing up through his teens and through his 20s. And he, of course, was very protective. And he ended up marrying Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and that was his wife right there. And he could have taken the easy way in life. He could have just rested on his laurels and been a Kennedy and lived a decent life. But that wasn't him. He was an entrepreneur. He started the magazine called George. But he made sure to stay relatively out of politics until he started the magazine George. And I believe that was when he was around 36 or 37. He started George, and the name comes from, of course, George Washington. So his magazine was George. So you would say, well, he created a magazine, so he was a media mogul, right? No, he was not. George, he started, it was a struggling magazine. He was working really hard to make it something, and he was living in New York, and he was literally being a true entrepreneur, trying to do it himself, figure it out, and become successful. He didn't have to do that. He was a Kennedy, of course. And prior to that, he often mentioned not wanting to be involved in politics until possibly later in life. So he just wanted to live his life. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He wanted to get married, have kids, things of that nature. I don't know about the kids part, but anyway, he wanted to get married and he wanted to start a magazine. So he's living in New York. He's familiar, I think he was friendly with Trump at the time. Trump was known to be palling around with the Clintons and so forth in the 90s. So then, so he wasn't extremely out there. Whenever he stepped out, he, of course, had paparazzi back then in 1999, and the Daily News and other New York newspapers and the tabloids would often talk about him. But again, he shielded himself pretty well. And he knew later on, and he talked about this, that if he was going to enter politics, it would be a little bit later on. So George, having the magazine George, was his first sort of step into politics. And then he ended up taking the fateful flight. So he could have flown privately. He could have flown commercially with another pilot, could have flown commercially, could have flown privately. But like being an entrepreneur with George, he liked to do it himself, right? He didn't want to rely on the Kennedy namesake. So he started the magazine on himself, and he also wanted to learn how to fly. And he had his own small airplane, which was a Piper Saratoga. I think it was a 1960-something Piper Saratoga, which was they call it a high-performance plane. It was a little bit too high performance for his level. I think he only had 200 to 300 hours of flying, and he ended up needing to go to Martha's Vineyard and to the Kennedy compound, and he was going to drop off his wife, Carolyn Bessette, and her sister. So it was the three of them in the plane on July 16th, 1999. And he took off from, I believe, Teterboro, and he flew over the Long Island Sound. Now, sadly, he should have flown over the coastline of Connecticut and then went across the Sound to Martha's Vineyard, but they were already running late. They left around 8:30 at night, so it was getting dark already, and he was just a regular VFR pilot, which means visual flight rules. He didn't have his instrument rating, and you can fly at night on a visual flight rules. But it's always very challenging when you can't see the horizon when it's getting dark. So they were already, this is very common with pilots when you get their itis, that you're running late, but you still push the boundaries. And he was a qualified VFR pilot, but he was behind schedule. And that's always a problem when you're flying an airplane, is being behind schedule. So he probably didn't want to, he wanted to, actually not probably, he wanted to arrive before sundown in Martha's Vineyard and to get to his compound in Massachusetts. But they started late, so that means he was going to be flying at night. What he didn't account for, not being an IFR pilot, is that it got foggy and it was starting to get dark late, and he's flying over the Long Island Sound, and he lost visual references to the water and to the land because he's flying in fog. And you end up getting what's called spatial disorientation, where the plane starts to turn, or you think the plane is turning, and you're not flying by your instruments, you're flying by the feel and your sight lines. But when you can't see anything, you can't feel anything in an airplane either. When you make a turn with your eyes closed in an airplane, you won't actually feel it. If I make a left turn with your eyes closed, you might think you're making a right turn. I know that sounds strange to believe, but it's actually true. If you hopped in a private plane, and I told you to close your eyes, and I started to make a couple turns, and I asked you which way I was turning, you would almost get it wrong all the time, unless you just happen to guess it right. Your body plays tricks on you, or your mind plays tricks on you, and when you think you're turning left, you're actually turning right. Now, you could say he should have just looked at the instruments, but he didn't have enough training. He didn't have enough experience. He was running late. He had pressures. So he ended up spiraling, doing the death spiral into the Long Island Sound. And he ended up dying, of course, with Carolyn and Lauren as well. So he could have dropped low enough to see land or water. No, fog usually is very low to the water. So depending on how high the fog was, he may have been able to climb out of the fog, but you wouldn't have been able to go below the fog. So once you get spatial disorientation, things go down, literally spiral very quickly. So here's where the story gets super interesting. So JFK Jr. and the Kennedy family has so many tragedies in their history. Here you have John F. Kennedy Jr., now deceased in 1999, and at 38 years old. Now, this is where it gets crazy, because he was planning to enter politics. It was very well known that eventually he would go into politics, because he had very passionate feelings about campaign finance reform and making sure big money in politics was restricted even more than it was at the time. He was really media friendly. He was liked by virtually everybody, and he was thought to be running for the New York Attorney General eventually in the next couple of years, or the Senate of New York, in the Senator of New York. And if you remember, Hillary Clinton ended up being a senator in New York in 2000. So it was a very high-profile House seat. Now you have to think deeper. So now let's get to the speed it up a little bit. JFK Jr., charismatic, coming from American political royalty, well-liked virtually by everybody, and no skeletons in his closet at that time. I'm not saying he was perfect, but just think about well-spoken, very kind, had paparazzi following him all the time. This is in 1999 when you didn't have that much paparazzi, but he always did. He was never an asshole, or very rarely an asshole, and that's why he was so well-liked, because he was raised so well by his mother, and that's why he was so well-liked. You couldn't not like this guy. You could be jealous of him, but you couldn't not like him. He was so charismatic and didn't have anything negative to say about anyone. He was just a decent human being. And so he ended up passing away. Now, how does that affect us today? So I want you to think about this. In 1999, if you do the timeline, he died in 1999 at 38 years old. He would have likely entered politics, not just as a senator, but as a presidential candidate in 2006. As a highly ranked, he would have been the most popular Democratic candidate probably in history by 2006. So 8 years later, 7 or 8 years later, when he would have been most likely, he was thought that he was going to run for senator or be the New York Attorney General to get a little bit of experience under his belt. And then it was always thought that he would run for president. So think about the timeline. If 2006, 8 years later, after his death, 7, 8 years later, he starts becoming prominent going into the 2008 presidential election. Who won in 2008? Barack Obama beat John McCain. Easily beat John McCain. If John F. Kennedy Jr. is rising to the Democratic heights in 2006, there is no Obama. Obama likely remains a senator from Illinois and does not challenge JFK Jr. If he did challenge JFK Jr., he would not have beaten him unless something unusual happened. JFK Jr. would have walked to the nomination of the Democratic Party easily, and he would have destroyed John McCain. Now, why is that important? Because it's around 2006 that Donald Trump and birtherism comes to rise. Donald Trump is just a well-known New York real estate figure in 2006. And of course, I don't know when he started The Apprentice, but obviously he had the TV show. He came to rise to power by spreading a lie from 2006, 2007, 2007, 2008, when Barack was running for the presidency. He started claiming that Obama was not an American. And he spread that lie for the next 8 years over Obama's entire 2 terms of being a president. So if JFK becomes or is running for president in 2006, Obama remains a senator from Illinois. JFK Jr. becomes the president of the United States in 2008, and Obama does not. That means Trump never rises to power or becomes relevant whatsoever because he cannot attack JFK Jr. based on birtherism, based on a lie. And that means Trump never gets political, never becomes a politician, because he's not going to have any challenge to JFK Jr., nor would he have wanted to, because he couldn't have used his birtherism hate against Obama. And that also created the Tea Party in 2008. So in 2008, the Tea Party comes to power, again, with the sole purpose to make sure that Obama is defeated in the next presidential election, or that they never pass any of Obama's policies. So you don't have the Tea Party rising to power. You don't have, at least not nearly as strong as it became. You don't have Trump becoming to power. And you know who else you don't have coming to power is you don't have Clinton. Hillary Clinton never becomes a viable primary nominee for the Democratic Party. So JFK Jr., his death is astonishing how this looks like. So now you have to also look at what did JFK Jr. want. Also, let's go to the Heritage Foundation. So the culture wars and the Heritage Foundation rise to power because of the culture wars and because of Donald Trump. And the WC nationalists, the white Christian nationalists, become a major power with the Heritage Foundation. And they also don't become powerful because they don't have the Tea Party, they don't have Trump, and they also become marginalized because of JFK Jr. You don't have these culture wars about race in the United States because of Obama and because of JFK being there. JFK's there. Now you don't have the culture wars nearly as much as you did. So now, that's right. So Jay Hill says, you also don't have the January 6th riots. So January 6th doesn't happen. Culture wars don't happen. And the Tea Party doesn't happen. There is no birther movement. And America just ends up not being nearly as divided. So his event, JFK Jr. passing away in 1999, has an enormous impact even to this very single day. Because who do we have in office? Donald Trump. Who did he, obviously, Joe Biden doesn't come into power, almost certainly not. Now, you might make an argument that if JFK Jr. became president in 2008, that maybe Obama would have rose to power in 2016. That is something that's possible, but that's getting a little bit too far out there. Who knows what would have maybe happened? My point with this story is that JFK Jr.'s passing of an amazing human being, an excellent human being that was so well liked. Now let's talk about what he really cared about in politics. His biggest priority in politics, even back in 1999, was campaign finance reform. That was his thing that he spoke about often, making sure that there's not too much money in politics, that billionaires and the wealthy corporations, that everyone paid their fair share of taxes, and that the billionaires couldn't have too much influence. So what else doesn't happen? So if campaign finance reform, he would have been running on campaign finance reform, government transparency, anti-corruption, and he would have had moderate progressive social views. And he also had a strong environmental focus, typical sort of Democratic side of things. So what else don't you have if he becomes president? You don't have MAGA. MAGA never materializes because Donald Trump is not there. So there's a thirst for leadership by the American public. Leadership. Now, leadership can come in two forms. Leadership can come from integrity, trustworthiness, character, morality, and so forth. Americans are thirsting for a leader with those qualities. But in absence of those qualities, America will also thirst for any leader that stands up even on the opposite side of the spectrum, which is immorality, indecency, and hate. They want a strong leader or a perceived strong leader, whether that leader has moral integrity and character and trustworthiness. If we don't have leadership with those qualities, America's thirst on the other side will end up in not just America. This has happened in Germany in World War II with, of course, Nazism, right? This has happened throughout history. Society's thirst for true leadership, whether that leadership is sinister in nature and actually wants to do harm, or that leadership is actually moral, takes the moral high ground and is trustworthy with integrity. So it's mind-boggling to me the more you think about this. And I'm going to read some comments because you guys have made some great comments. I just can't read them fast enough. I want to live in the JFK dimension. Can we go back? Yes, I truly do. I was alive at this time. I was from New York. I understand the ramifications that JFK Jr.'s death had. And that's why I'm trying to share this with those of you who may not fully understand. Let's talk about also the Citizens United. Because JFK Jr. would have been running on campaign finance reform and making sure money stays out of politics, you also don't have Citizens United. It never would have come into play in the 2010 and 2014 Supreme Court because they wouldn't have had enough power. They would have been diluted, but most likely by the policies that JFK Jr. would have wanted to enact. And likely Citizens United never becomes law if JFK Jr. is alive. And on opposite spectrum, we probably would have had stricter campaign finance reform because the Supreme Court would also look incredibly different today with JFK Jr. being president in 2008. No MAGA, no current Supreme Court that's ridiculously politicized, no MAGA, no Trump, no Hillary Clinton, no Barack Obama, at least not until 2016. None of these things. Our world is it's like an alternative universe. It's like that's the universe we should be living in. That's the universe we deserved, to live in an alternative reality, because today's reality is the impact of this one thing happening. It's astonishing. July 16th, 1999, with JFK Jr. crashing his plane into the Long Island Sound with his wife, Carolyn Bessette, and her sister, changed the world forever. Not just America. Our geopolitics would be completely different. Russia and China do not rise to power in the same way because America is not divided. So when America is more united, and I'm not saying we would be perfectly united. Don't misconstrue what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is a powerful, less divided, and more united America keeps all authoritarians and all dictators in check. It prevents them from wanting to use their imperial desires because America is strong and united, and you don't attack a united America. It is foolish to do so. You divide America, which is what Trump did using birtherism and Obama, using Hillary Clinton, using culture wars and race wars and gender wars. This creates a divided, weak America. And then you don't have Russia most likely even going into Ukraine in 2014. Like, the ramifications here are just so stunning. It's hard to even put into words sometimes how incredibly different our world looks like if JFK Jr. Does not pass away in the plane crash in 1999. So those of you that are Gen Z or millennials, I would ask you, and Gen Xers and boomers, now that I'm talking about this, you probably realize how much this is making sense, right? So I'm going to read some comments here. If anyone wants to join as a guest and talk about it and ask some questions, or even provide more insight, some of the things that I missed. So I've been doing a lot of research on this. This is not something I actually needed to do a lot of research on this, because I've been thinking about this for 10 or 20 years already. This is something, when I go back to, most of us pass away and something happens to one of us, life goes on, the world moves on, and nothing really changes other than very locally around your family. But when JFK Jr. died, the current democratic world order of for the people, or the vision for the people, by the people, our representative democracy started to die in 1999 when he passed away. Our representative democracy, between MAGA coming to power, Citizens United happening, Obama being leveraged by Trump for birtherism to spread a lie for over a decade about him not being an American, none of that happens. None of it happens. The world is completely different from one guy. Something happened dimensionally, right? Is there an alternative universe out there? If there are parallel universes, can I go? I would like to go. I can't stay to watch, but I love this topic. Thanks very much. It seems like the topic is now gaining some traction. So if anyone wants to join as a guest and give me some additional insight, jump into request up and join in, and let's talk about this. I know a lot of people have joined late, so I'm going to do a little summary for you on this topic. So JFK Jr. became famous as I think he was 3 years old at this time, in 1963. The most iconic photo, arguably the most iconic photo in the entire 20th century, in the 1900s. It's JFK Jr. right here saluting his father's assassination when his casket was in front of him. This was unprompted. This was JFK Jr. doing it himself. He was not prompted by Jimmy Carter's behind him and other leaders. None of this was prompted. He ended up saluting his father's casket in 1963. And not just America, but the media around the world went crazy, because they were like, oh my goodness, this son, his father has died, he's saluting him. And this photo went viral around the world. And it is one of the most iconic photos of the 20th century. So then he ends up growing up in New York, becoming a very well-respected man, living his life by himself, and then marrying Carolyn Bessette in his 30s. And he started a magazine called George. Now, he had paparazzi following him around all the time. He was very well respected. He was very well liked. Yes, his parents come from a Democratic Party, but even the people on the right, you could not deny this guy had enormous amount of charisma, and he was just extremely popular, but he was also extremely private. That's not Jimmy. Is that RFK? No, I think Jimmy Carter's behind him as well. Is it not? Is that RFK? Okay, interesting. You're saying only a white guy could have saved us from white hate. I agree. Listen, I'm saying Trump couldn't have leveraged a man of color, a black man, to rise to power. That's a better way to say it. Trump would have never been able to use birtherism or hate against JFK Jr. and would have never been able to use race because, of course, JFK was white. So racism at that level in terms of birtherism never happens. That means Trump never comes to power. Yeah, but that's gross. Why do you realize that it's such a terrible thing to say? I don't. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Oh, so Coco, you were born a year after the assassination of JFK had an everlasting impact. Oh, okay, of 1964, it sounds like. So you were born in 1964. All right, so thanks for all the comments and thanks for likes. Thanks for tuning into this story because it's so important. So JFK Jr. died in 1999, July 16th, 1999, crashing his plane, his small private Saratoga single-engine plane into the Long Island Sound. My contention here to those that are you joining late is JFK Jr. was the son of JFK, who was assassinated in 1963. He ended up living in New York, growing up in a very private way. His mother was very protective over him ever since this moment until he became an adult. Now, you would say because he was so wealthy and because he came from the Kennedy family, he could have been just a little D-bag, right? He could have been a little shyster, like Trump. Trump grew up in New York, and he ended up being a complete D-bag and just a loser, right? Someone who stole money and grifted money from, went bankrupt numerous times, grifted money, didn't pay people in there for Atlantic City, building casinos in Atlantic City, and not paying contractors. And he could have been just a D-bag like Trump is, or was. But JFK Jr. was not like that. He was a kind, very popular, no frills, not no frills, but he never got into trouble. He was followed by the paparazzi constantly, but he was always a decent, humble man, even though he was extremely popular and extremely charismatic. If you've ever seen the Seinfeld episode, like he was bachelor number one all throughout New York in the 1990s. Like, every woman was fawning over this guy. And if you were growing up in New York, you were probably jealous of him because he had the world at his fingertips. But he didn't live off of his parents' money like you might think. He was an entrepreneur. He started this magazine called George. It was a struggling magazine, and he wanted to make it work. He also didn't want to be flown around by private pilots. He could have flown commercially to Martha's Vineyard to drop off Carolyn Bessette and then move on to Massachusetts. But he wanted to be a pilot himself. He was a do-it-yourselfer. He was not about living off of his family's fortune. Of course, he could have done that, but he was all about doing things himself. JFK Jr. was far more intelligent than Trump and reserved and thoughtful. When he was asked questions, he would pause. He would think about the answers, and he was not someone that ever spread hate. How many hours of flight time did he had? That's a great question. I think it was about 200 to 300 hours of flight time that JFK Jr. had, which, if you know anything about piloting, when is the most dangerous time of being a pilot? Most people would say probably right after you get your pilot's license. It's not. It ends up being between 300 and 400 hours. 400 hours is when most people end up getting in trouble in piloting. That's where most of the mistakes happen. And it's because when you become a private pilot, you're very cautious in the beginning. You know your limitations. But and sort of like being a teenager. He was a teenager in pilot years. Think of it as a teenager. When you're a teenager, that's when it was a single engine plane. When you're a teenager, that's when the most dangerous time of your life is, when you're most likely to do some stupid things because you think you know a lot, but you don't know much at all. And that's what happens when you become a pilot and you're around a 300 to 400 hour mark, is you end up becoming too overconfident. So he was a VFR pilot. He was not an IFR pilot, which means he's only supposed to fly in visual flight conditions. He's not allowed to fly in IMC, which is instrument meteorological conditions. Excuse me, I always have a hard time saying that. And he could not fly in fog, so he had to fly, obviously, where he could see because he never had his instrument rating. He eventually wanted to get his instrument rating, but it's not unusual to wait until you have several hundred hours to get your instrument rating. He did not have 1,500. Oh, I have 1,500 hours in the military. Okay, I was going to say, I thought you said that he had 1,500 hours. No, he was a relatively new pilot, over water, over fog, had spatial disorientation, lost sight of the water and the land masses around him, and ended up getting spatial disorientation, and he crashed into the Long Island Sound. Not something that's unusual. So people think it's a conspiracy. It's not. So he was at the teenage years of being a pilot. That's when you get overconfident because your skills, your physical skills of flying an airplane become really quite good. Just like a teenager skateboarding for a lot of years. You become really good, you're overconfident, but your experience and your knowledge is still extremely limited. So when you get into a situation that you're unfamiliar with, you have all these very refined skills, knowing how to land an airplane, know how to, things start to become second nature. But your experience is very, very limited. And so your overconfidence with limited experience is when most people end up having issues and crashing their airplanes. As you have more experience, you understand your limitations, and they're not physical limitations, they're more just knowledge limitations. So he needed more hours, absolutely. It's a great way of saying a clean sweep demand is he was down to earth, a human being, and know who killed his father. So yes, he was a very down to earth, very popular individual. So let me go through it again for those of you that missed the first part of that. So after he ends up dying in 1999, how does that affect everything today? And to recap that, it's 1999 when he perishes, and he was always known to be wanting to go into politics as he got a little bit older, into his 40s. So if he runs for president, or becomes a Democratic nominee in 2006, 2007, going into the 2008 elections. Think about the amount of ramifications of that happens, the ripple effect of his death. So if he goes into politics in 2006, 2007, good night, CRL, appreciate you being here. I know I'm going to repeat the story for those of you jumping in new, so appreciate you, CRL. I want everyone to think about whether you're Gen Z, millennial, or Gen X, or even a boomer, how much our world is different if JFK Jr. survives and ends up entering politics. Because he enters politics in 2008, which means Obama doesn't have a chance to win the Democratic nomination. JFK Jr. cruises to the Democratic nomination. Hillary Clinton does not become U.S. Senator in 2000 or 2004, because JFK Jr. would have been either senator or would have been the Attorney General of New York, working his way towards the presidency. And then he runs for presidency, and that means Trump never comes to power based on birtherism. Trump only becomes super popular in politics over the next 8 years because Obama becomes president, and Trump is claiming the whole time that Obama is not an American and shouldn't be president. So he was using race-filled hate to become popular on the right, meaning Trump. So if Obama is not president and JFK Jr. is, Obama never rises to power. Obama remains a senator from Illinois, a popular senator, but nonetheless a senator from Illinois. Trump never rises to power. That means Hillary Clinton, never becomes the Democratic nominee, most likely, because JFK Jr., that would have maybe gone to Obama in 2016, but you don't know how those things play out thereafter. You also don't have the Tea Party. The Tea Party never becomes a thing in 2008. And you also end up not having these culture wars because Obama never rises to power. So culture wars don't become a thing. The Heritage Foundation never rises to the amount of power that it has today, and never able to write as much money. If someone is a script writer, I would love to do a video and have a script about talking about this story, about the ramifications of JFK Jr. passing away in 1999 and how it affects every one of our lives today, because Trump is still in power. Trump is not president today if JFK is president in 2008. It doesn't happen. Trump just maintains to be some loudmouth blowhole real estate guy from New York that most of America doesn't know about because he never comes down that escalator. Trump never comes down that escalator. And that means MAGA never happens. Because remember, America is thirsty for true leadership. And if that leadership doesn't come from someone with high moral integrity and high trustworthiness, it will come from the opposite place. And that's exactly what happened. So without the culture wars, without MAGA, without the Tea Party, without this extreme right-wing party that's based on hate, you have JFK Jr., America is much less divided. And I'm not saying it's not divided to some extent. And then that has ramifications around the rest of the world. I blame Home Alone 2 for Trump. Yeah, I do too. That's funny. He was in Home Alone 2, wasn't he? I think. Okay, so any questions? So I'm going to read questions in the comments now. And if anyone wants to join as a guest, yesterday was actually a light guest day. So if you want to join as a guest and talk about, let's talk about why you think I might be wrong. Why do I think I might be wrong? If JFK Jr. doesn't die in the plane crash in 1999, how is our world not dramatically different? You can even punch this in. And this is something that I knew full well going into this, but of course I looked it up in more detail even today, going through the different scenarios with AI, and it's pretty much the same thing. Our politics, the indirect long-term effect of our politics today, if JFK Jr. survived and became president, our U.S. politics is a lot less polarized than it is today. Democracy is not under threat anymore because the Heritage Foundation and the billionaires from Silicon Valley are also not nearly involved, because JFK Jr. was all about his number one mission was to have very strict campaign finance laws in the country. And that means Citizens United never happens either. Culture wars, as we know them, are also significantly reduced if JFK Jr. is not here. So if we're living in a parallel universe, or if there is a parallel universe, boy, I certainly want to be there. And this goes to show how sometimes one person's death can change the entire direction of the world and every one of our lives. Because right now we're living each day under enormous threats from foreign actors in our government, from billionaires impacting or influencing our government. Trump has allowed all these nefarious forces to come into our government, and that would have never happened with JFK Jr. You can always know how if someone has values and integrity, it's just that simple. And that man right here, JFK Jr., did have values and integrity. He was brought up as a great human, a very interesting human being that everyone really liked. Okay, so today was actually sort of a practice run for me on this. Let me read some more comments. Have you ever read 11/22/63 by Stephen King? I have not. There's a mini-series too. I have not read that. So let me see some other questions. Unfortunately, those laws didn't happen, right? If Citizens United doesn't ever happen, if JFK Jr. survives and doesn't die in 1999, Citizens United likely never happens. Our Supreme Court looks dramatically different, with a lot more moderates on it than having these right-wing zealots on the Supreme Court. So Citizens United never happens, most likely. Because, Obama obviously put in, I think, one Supreme Court justice over his 8 years. But because of the focus that JFK Jr. would have had on campaign finance reform, that would have never happened. Since 1970s, in Buckley versus Vallejo, which was the first sort of campaign finance restrictions, or erosion of campaign finance restrictions, allowing money to come into politics, some untrackable money and no limits, started happening in the 1970s, and Citizens United was sort of the last straw of removing all campaign finance restrictions. So Citizens United doesn't happen, the ruling, if JFK Jr. survives. Greg Pooh, is the Donnie audio real? I heard it today, and I don't know if it's real. I did not look into it. Because RBG wouldn't retire. That's right. RGP should have retired. Love JFK Jr. too. I want to be a great man, want to be a good man, right? It's right. He was someone with deep moral integrity. So that's probably it for today's show, unless someone wants to join in and talk about this. Someone else want to connect the dots to JFK Jr. Again, I wish more Gen Z and millennials knew the story. There needs to be is there not a movie about what would have happened if that's Hollywood blockbuster right there. If there's anyone that knows any Hollywood producers, I don't know if I haven't seen a movie about this. If someone wanted to put together a fiction documentary about JFK Jr., what if he did not die? How would the world look like today? That needs to be a Hollywood blockbuster that would be crazy popular. And if Gen Z or millennials would watch that movie, they would realize how everything could change if JFK Jr. So thanks everybody for just joining. For those of you just joining, you probably missed most of the story here. Yeah, Coco, like, wow, we should have a movie about JFK Jr. dying and what if he didn't die? Interview people, talk to even Trump. Like, Trump doesn't happen, MAGA doesn't happen, the Tea Party doesn't happen, Obama never rises to power, Hillary Clinton never becomes a political candidate. Citizens United is never passed or never ruled upon. Stunning the amount of ramifications and the ripple effect that this has of JFK Jr. dying. So 1999, the event that changed the world, July 16th, 1999, not just changed the world, changed every one of our lives. So the 82 people that are here, if JFK Jr. didn't crash his plane and was still alive, our entire country, the political system, geopolitics around the world would be completely different and much better than it would be today. We could be a much happier nation right now. Absolutely. Just think about the amplification of culture wars, gender wars, culture wars, race wars, etc. We wouldn't be nearly as divided. Now, we still had social media that still would have been leveraged, but you would never had the same, you could almost trace everything that happened in terms of accepting hate speech back to Trump and birtherism against Obama. And then, of course, the Tea Party. So the Tea Party and Trump made it acceptable to spread hate and to spread misinformation. And also Russia, in their conjunction with Russia and other foreign powers, wanting us to spread misinformation. If you had JFK Jr. as president in 2008, none of those things become more viable. They become a lot less likely that they would have happened. Concrete Angel, do you really believe it was an accident? Absolutely. It was 100% an accident. I've flown that route personally many times. When you have a 200 to 300 hour, let's find out how many hours did it have. How many flight hours did JFK Jr. So to answer that question more accurately from earlier. All right, so JFK Jr. had around 310 total flight hours of experience when he crashed his plane, which is in that coffin zone where you're most dangerous. Between 300 to 500 hours is when you're the most dangerous pilot, and you should be really careful because he's very skillful. He's a very skilled pilot after 300 hours, but your experience is very, very low. So when you combine lots of confidence with not much experience, you enter enormous amount of risk. And all you have to do is think like a teenager. That's what a teenager is, right? Teenagers think they know it all, but they have a very limited experience, very limited knowledge, but they have a lot of capability. And that's when they become very dangerous, right? That's when you're most likely to harm yourself in a car accident and so forth, is when you're a teenager, when you have relatively low hours and no knowledge. Did the aircraft have pontoons on it? I think only boats have pontoons. No, it was an old 1960s ex-Saratoga single-engine airplane that he had. It was considered a high-performance aircraft, which at 310 hours is more than enough hours to control what they call a high-performance single-engine aircraft. High performance is something like 300 horsepower. Then it becomes a high-performance aircraft. He only had about 55 hours of night flying out of the 310, which is not bad. You don't fly nearly as much as night. So he had 55 hours of night flying, which is a fairly good amount, but he had no experience. He had only 72. Oh, interesting. Okay. So he only had 72 hours roughly of flight without a certified flight instructor. So this is actually unusual. Most of the time, and I think this was because of his family, if I remember properly. A CFI is a certified flight instructor. That is the person that trains you to become a pilot. Oftentimes, when you're becoming a pilot, whether it takes you roughly anywhere between 50 and 80 hours to become a pilot, you always are flying with a certified flight instructor. And then once you get your pilot's license, you end up not flying with a certified flight instructor because you're now a pilot. So most of the experience comes on your own. However, he had 310 hours of total flight experience, but only 72 of those hours weren't with a flight instructor. So his family wanted him to always fly with a flight instructor for a very long time, much longer than most people would have. So he flew with a flight instructor for 240 hours, roughly 240 hours, which when I had got my pilot's license, I got it with around 48 for 50 hours. I became a pilot. And the only other time I would ever hire a CFI is when I took my IFR training for becoming an instrument flight pilot, an IFR rated flight pilot. Then I went back to a CFI for a week and got my IFR rating. I would never fly with a CFI once I got my pilot's license because you don't need to. And of course, it's more money. Now, his family wanted him to fly with a CFI for a very long time. That's why he had 240 hours of flight experience. But most of that flight experience was with a flight instructor, which is actually, you could argue that because he didn't have enough time without a flight instructor, he didn't even have as much experience as you would expect him to have with 310 hours because he always had a crutch, right? When you have a flight instructor with you, that flight instructor is a crutch. And you don't learn the things that you need to when you only have to make the decisions for yourself. So he was, even though he had 310 hours of flight experience, he had a lot less individual single pilot flight time, only 72 hours worth. I remember that, of course, his wife, Carolyn Bissett, and their parents didn't want him to fly with both of the girls ever. And he ended up taking both his wife and his wife's sister, and they were going to drop them off in Martha's Vineyard, and then he was going to continue his flight to Massachusetts. But he got started much too late in the evening. He was supposed to leave in the daytime when it would have been easier to fly, and he ended up getting started much later than expected, flew into the Long Island Sound, which was very foggy that night, which is very common in the summer, and he ended up obviously, and that's not an untypical story, that when you are rushed to put in a flight, he should have waited for the next day to make that flight. He didn't have enough experience. It's a little stressful enough to fly at night, and it adds to the stress. Now you add in obviously foggy conditions or any sort of weather conditions whatsoever, and things can go south quickly because when you're at night, you can't see where you can land. So even if you have an engine out situation in the daytime, that's already very dangerous, but it's much more manageable if you lose your engine in the daytime. If you lose your engine at night, you don't know where you're going to land. You can see nothing, right? So you can land into a building, you can land into wires, you can land into trees. You can't find an open field. You can't find a road. So at night, everything becomes of much higher consequence. Coco, yeah, you can think that, conspiracy theories when you have someone that popular, but that makes no sense. Everything from the NTSB, him starting late, everything leads having low experience, flying without a flight instructor or without another pilot on board. All these things are very common in flight training or when you become an early stage pilot, that the danger is so high at that time. So there's nothing that is nefarious about his crashing. No, he could not see the lights, Jen, because he was over the Long Island Sound, and there's no lights, of course, over water. And even though the Long Island Sound is not that wide, he was approaching, I think he was about 20 miles from Martha's Vineyard. With foggy conditions, you cannot see the coast. I actually got in a situation leaving Block Island a couple of years later after this passing. I was flying with a friend. He was the pilot. And we ended up getting in very similar conditions. Block Island is an island just not too far from Martha's Vineyard. We ended up taking off from Block Island. The weather looked wonderful. We ended up leaving the island, and within minutes, we got enveloped in fog as well. My friend was also not an IFR flight qualified pilot at that time, and we actually got very nervous. But we knew all we had to do is fly north and get into the Connecticut coast. So I helped him, just making sure we were watching the instruments, and we just kept the wings level, and we flew directly north. And once we got over the land, the fog completely went away, and then everything was fine, right? But when you're in fog over water at night, you see nothing. Bobby says, I believe he's still alive. The paparazzi's hounding him. Why do some people, I don't know if you're joking, like certain people love conspiracies. There's a difference between conspiracies and cover-ups. The difference, how I view them anyways, not the technical definition, is conspiracies are conspiracies because they're not real. And cover-ups, on the other hand, are cover-ups and known to be cover-ups because they're always uncovered. Because once you have two or more people trying to keep a secret, it never becomes a secret. So a cover-up is not a conspiracy. It's called a cover-up because you actually had people trying to cover it up for a limited amount of time, but it always becomes uncovered, and that ends up becoming real. Conspiracies end up being always fake because there's no real facts. And if it was a cover-up of anything with two or more people, it would be uncovered very clearly. So difference between conspiracies and cover-ups, that's not the technical definition. That's how I look at it. And that's why it explains everything that has ever happened to America in modern day. Absolutely. So let me know in the comments if you joined late and you want to if you want me to give you a quick recap on why JFK Jr., starting here when he's saluting his father's death to his death in 1999, I can do a recap and a summary of why this impacted everything in the entire world and how this one man's passing affects you. It affects me every single day to this day. Everything that's happening to us is because of this man passing away in 1999. If you want the summary, let me know in the comments. I'll go through it again and I'll do a quick summary on it because I think it's stunning. I'm going to probably do a video on it tomorrow. This is sort of like my practice run. I need to do this within 3 or 4 minutes on a video. I hope people will enjoy the video because they know that they need to know. Gen Z, millennials, Gen X need to connect the dots and understand the ripple effect of this one man passing away. And if anyone, that's a stretch, 3 or 4 minutes? And does anyone want to join as a guest and just have a discussion about what the world would be like with that if JFK Jr. actually lived and ended up becoming president in 2008? Let's have a discussion because I think we can bounce some ideas. Georgium, oh my God, I have a new conspiracy. Great. You should do, if you have a new conspiracy, you should work on a script and you should post a YouTube video on a conspiracies because conspiracies on YouTube do incredibly well, right? Princhy, poor Carolyn, do you think Jack will win politics? And Angelica, you're welcome for sharing this. I think about this story all the time. I'm just blown away. So let me, while I still have a good group of people here, let me know if you want a summary. But most importantly, so I know this sounds outlandish, but if you didn't hear me mention it before, the impact of JFK Jr. dying. So JFK Jr. was going to enter politics most likely in the 2006 to 2008 timeframe, about 8 years after he died as a 38-year-old. So he would have been 46 running. Okay, summary, please, Maddie. Okay, I'm going to get to that summary in just a second. And he would have been running, his number one priority in politics was campaign finance reform. So if I can do anything to help carry on this man's legacy, it's about campaign finance reform, something I haven't mentioned often. We need to have a 28th and a 29th amendment. There are 27 amendments right now. The first 10 were the Bill of Rights. The next 17 were 17 amendments that have been passed since the Constitution was ratified. And we need 2 more amendments. And this would carry on the legacy of JFK Jr. because his number one priority was campaign finance reform. He knew that money in politics was dangerous. Just like I always try and convey to my audience, is that we need to eliminate the corruption from our political system. And we need to have all elections be publicly funded by people, human beings, not corporations, not special interests, not NGOs, not lobbyists, etc., etc. The 28th Amendment needs to say that all elections need to be publicly funded by individual human beings, point blank. Right? That will solve virtually everything in our society if we can have a 28th Amendment, because that removes lobbyists, corporate special interests. It removes the religious groups from politics. It removes the foreign governments. The amount of money being influenced into our system, how many people are being bribed, and the amount of corruption that's happening within our government system is allowed to be there legally because of Citizens United and Vallejo versus Buckley of the 1970s and Citizens United and the complete erosion of campaign finance restrictions. And John F. Kennedy Jr. was known, even at that time, it was becoming a problem. And get rid of all the PACs and all the super PACs. It all needs to go the way. We need to have representation that represents the people. People over profit. The people first, corporations and everything else thereafter. We all know this to be true. Like every single one of us knows that we should be having our representation for the people, by the people. But we don't. We have representation by the corporations, for the PACs, for the lobbyists, et cetera, et cetera. So this wouldn't have happened with JFK Jr. being in office. So I would like to help do whatever I can to carry that on. And I always promote a 28th Amendment. Then we also need to have a 29th Amendment. That means that being a politician cannot be a career, which means term limits, that you need to be a temporary civic servant. So now you can't stay in power too long and you can't enrich yourself, right? Because the 28th Amendment would be preventing you from enriching yourself. And if you do try and take money from anything other than individual American citizens up to a certain limit, let's say $2,000, then you go to jail. You get criminally prosecuted and you go to jail. You cannot take money from any outside group whatsoever. It has to come from individual people, human beings. But of course, the Supreme Court has ruled that the insanity of it, that corporations are people or personhoods, and they have the same free speech rights, meaning they can then contribute as much money as they want to. So John F. Kennedy Jr., if I can carry on his legacy of what he would have wanted to see, we need to have a 28th and a 29th Amendment. So if you're not familiar with those, I ask you to please read my plan. The link is under the Linktree link underneath my profile. So if you tap on my profile and you see a link that says Linktree, you'll see a plan called the Citizens Plan to bring representation back to the people. And it revolves around a 28th and a 29th Amendment. People say it's impossible. It will never happen. I'm telling you, it's not impossible. If any one of us, whether it's me or someone else, can rally enough support, 50 million people, it's going to take 50 million people who want to enact a 28th and 29th Amendment. And that means we're not divided, because whether you're conservative or you're a liberal, you'll agree with this. You'll agree that the influence by billionaires, by corporations, by foreign governments, by all the super PACs needs to go away. And that's the 28th Amendment. And there's more than 100 million people, well more, that would agree with this. We just have to reach them. As someone said to me, I guess there's a saying that if you want to be a leader but you have no followers, you're just talking to yourself while you're taking a walk. So that's why we need to build an audience and become relevant. And then I can enact the plan that I have to bring representation back to the people. And like I always say, I will never ask you for your vote. I will never become a politician, but I want to organize a movement. And I know how to do that. I have a lot of experience in technology and growing movements and growing communities and putting myself out there. So I'll put myself out there to say, will you support a 28th, 29th Amendment? If you do, please read a Citizens Plan to bring representation back to the people. It is in my bio. Go to my bio, Angelico, right under my profile, and you can read the plan. And please repost that plan. It's on Medium, and it's also on Substack as an article. And then if you can do whatever you can do to repost some of my videos, you can just look at my most popular pinned videos, and please repost them as much as you can. This is not about me becoming a content creator or wanting influence. It's about wanting to become relevant for the plan. Because I know there's 50 million people that would want a 28th and 29th Amendment, and JFK Jr. would not roll over in his grave. He would be applauding from his grave that we are continuing his work of making sure there's government transparency, there's campaign finance reform, restricting all big money in politics, that we have anti-corruption laws, that we bring back the fairness doctrine in our media, and all those types of things. And we can do it because there's enough people that would support it. Instead of arguing about immigration or about culture wars or gender wars, etc., we could actually focus on things that actually will change our lives and bring us back to the other parallel universe that if JFK Jr. didn't die, how much different the world would be. So thanks for listening in. So Maddie, 52, you're in. All right, so let's go through another summary. I know that most of the people already listened to the story. I'm going to do a quick summary of the story one more time. I hope that I'll get better at it each time. If anyone wants to join as a guest, please jump into the request and join as a guest, and let's talk about it. But one last summary of JFK Jr. If he didn't crash and was still alive, how would this one event have changed the course of history? So I'm going to step out of the way for a second. You got JFK Jr. right here. This is him as I believe he was 3 years old, saluting his father's casket when JFK was assassinated in 1963. This is JFK Jr. This is one of the most iconic photos taken in the 1900s in the 20th century. This went around the world, and he ended up growing into a fine young man in living in New York. So JFK Jr., who was married to Carolyn Bessette when he was 38. He was very well respected in the New York scene. He was very private. He held his private life very close to the chest, but he was constantly had paparazzi following him around in New York. And he was never a D-bag. He was always a humble, decent human being. When he did do interviews, he was very kind and forthright, and that made him incredibly popular. Never to mind that he was very good-looking man. He was the bachelor of the century, basically, in New York at that time, before he got married. And he was just very well respected, not just by people on the left, but also by people on the right. And it was always known that JFK Jr. here, just call him Jr., was going to eventually enter politics. His signal that he was going to enter politics was this magazine right here, George. This is based on George Washington. I think this is the first issue. He called it George because of George Washington. Prior to him starting the magazine, he obviously was in the limelight of politics from his family from a very young age. But throughout his 20s and throughout his 30s, he wanted nothing to do with politics or never at least speak about it. And like Matty Pie 52 here says, he was very intelligent and he was a very respectful human being. And again, he was very well liked by everybody. So it was always known he was going to eventually go into politics. And when he came out with the magazine, that's where people really understood that he was going into politics eventually. He's working his way into it. He was 38 years old, and you might just say he was a media mogul. He was a magazine mogul. He was not. He was a do-it-yourselfer. He started this magazine, I think, on relatively a shoestring budget. It was not very successful. He was struggling to keep it alive for a long time, and he didn't want to give up on it. And that shows also becoming a pilot. He wanted to do things for himself. He didn't want to rely on his family's legacy and his family's money. He wanted to actually make a name for himself and not just be a Kennedy. So that's what you have to understand about him. He had values. He had empathy. He had morals. He was always decent. He was very well respected. He was intelligent. Thank you, Coco. Thanks for tuning in. And this is what happened. So he started the magazine, and then it was always known he was going to go into politics. So now he ended up crashing his plane on July 16th, 1999, into the Long Island Sound. It was a single-engine airplane. He got spatial disorientation from flying in the fog. He ended up starting his flight much too late in the evening. He was supposed to start it around 5 o'clock. This is in the summertime when it stays late until about 8:30 or 9. And but he ended up getting a late start. And this happens often when you're a pilot. You get there-itis, it's called, and you think you're just going to make the flight anyway. He should have scrubbed the flight. He only had 300 hours of flight time, and he was flying over water at night. And he thought he could get the first to Martha's Vineyard to drop off his wife and his wife's sister, and then proceed to Massachusetts. But he got started late, so he was rushing to get off the ground. And then, of course, he gets over the Long Island Sound, and it ends up becoming foggy. And as a VFR pilot, meaning visual flight rules, he didn't have his instrument rating, so he could only fly when he could see. Even at night, generally, you can see land, you can see lights when it's clear. But if it's any weather, and in this case, there's fog, which is very normal over the Long Island Sound, you can't see anything. And he didn't have the training on his instruments to be an IFR rated pilot. and he got what's called spatial disorientation. It's very common when your body thinks you're making a turn when you're really not. So it feels like you're turning, but you can't see outside, so you can't see if you're actually in a turning. You have to rely on your instruments to tell you. So this is very common, especially at a young pilot or low-hour pilot, to put yourself in a situation where you're a pretty skilled pilot at 300 hours, but you're not very knowledgeable. And he ended up dying with both his wife and his wife's sister on July 16th in 1999. So you might think, why do you care? Why does it matter? Because it changed the world forever. Most of us, when we pass, it has really no impact on the rest of the world. But when this guy passed, it changed the world. And to this day, what we're living in to this day is impacted. Because here's why. Most likely, JFK Jr. starts running. He would have become the AG or a senator of New York in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, getting more political experience. He most likely starts becoming the Democratic nominee in 2007, going into 2008. No one in the Democratic Party had any chance of beating JFK Jr. on the Democratic side if he was running for presidency. So who was running in 2008? Barack Obama. Barack Obama was running in 2008. So JFK Jr. lives. Barack Obama remains a senator from Illinois, a very popular senator from Illinois. And I'm going to let no one, you're going to come in and I'm just going to finish the summary as you're hanging. So that means if JFK Jr. is running for president in 2008, Barack Obama becomes just a footnote in history. And then you don't have Trump rising to power, because Trump rose to prominence because of Trump birtherism against claiming that Obama was not an American citizen. So if JFK runs, you don't have Trump spending the next 8 years of his life talking about how Obama is not an American citizen. And then there's not this racism, division of racism at that time. And of course, then you have JFK Jr. becoming president. Now, if JFK Jr. becomes president, you also don't have the Tea Party. The Tea Party never rises to power in 2008, because the Tea Party rose to power also opposing everything that Obama wanted to do. That does not happen if JFK Jr. is president. That also means Hillary Clinton most likely never becomes senator of New York. And even if she does, she is overshadowed by JFK Jr. And then Hillary Clinton never becomes but a Democratic Party nominee in 2016. So without Trump, you also don't have MAGA. So there's no MAGA anymore. So when JFK Jr. becomes president, the ripple effect that this has is astonishing. No more Tea Party, no more MAGA, no more Trump. Obama just becomes a popular senator from Illinois. No more Hillary Clinton. And you don't have Trump today. And you also don't have the Heritage Foundation rising to power in Project 2025, which is happening, of course, right now and has been happening for the last 10 years. And you also don't have Citizens United. That ruling almost certainly does not happen, meaning removing all campaign finance restrictions, because that was JFK's number one priority, was campaign finance reform, making sure that money in politics couldn't be an issue. So you would have more government transparency, you'd have less corruption, and you'd have strict campaign finance reform. So no MAGA, no Tea Party, no Obama, no Hillary, no Heritage Foundation, at least not nearly as powerful as they are now. Citizens United never happens. And you have a lot less, the birther movement never happens, which means MAGA never happens, because MAGA's born from the birther movement. And then you also don't have this radical division within our country. You're still going to have, obviously, the division between Republicans and Democrats. But without him being there, without Obama being there, and without Trump being there, you don't have nearly as much division throughout our society. And then how that affects the rest of the world. Russia becomes more contained, so does China. The entire geopolitical landscape changes forever. And that means in 2025, so you think 26 years later after JFK Jr.'s death, it is still having an impact on us every single day because of JFK Jr. dying. It's astonishing. Welcome, no one.
TK, how are you, bud?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing good. You disappeared. You went hiatus for about a week there, didn't you?
I did. I did. I took a week off and I was trying to get my bearings and figure out how I'm going to continue to spread the message of basically what the same thing that JFK Jr. wanted to do, right? Which is making sure they
Yeah.
get rid of campaign finance.
I'm curious. Uh, you're saying that you believe. I mean, obviously, we'll never know, but that he would have likely ran and won the spot as the AG. Do you think he would have transitioned from there to a senator, or do you think he would have went through as a representative first? I mean, being the AG and then transferring into, in other words, going to become a senator and then president. That seems like a quick transition to get him to 2008.
It does. I think that's a fair question as well. You could make an argument that Obama still comes to power and then at some point JFK Jr. So let's say Obama comes to power and then JFK Jr. runs after Obama in 2016, right? I guess that is also an alternative theory that you
That's
could
where I was
have.
going. Yeah, that's where I was going. I was actually thinking, was he old enough to run, and could he have ran if he'd have been so inclined to do so, and won after Bill Clinton, and we'd have never had the Bushes in the presidency.
Yeah, so he died when he was 38. You need to be 35. So after when was Bush was 2000, right? So he could have run in 2000, but he wasn't ready to. He made it
So,
very clear he had no interest in running. He the prevailing wisdom was that he wanted to become AG first or maybe a senator. But I think it was more leaning towards the AG of New York. Now, you can make an argument in 2007, if he's AG of New York to get a little, Trump didn't have any political experience, right? And he rose to power. I think there would have been enormous pressure on JFK Jr. on himself by 2006, 2007, where he probably would have run. But I think you're right. I think he could have made an argument that he saw Obama there and maybe he would have let Obama would have rose to power and he would have decided to sit it out.
right, and my next question is, whatever route he took, even if he became president in 2008, um, you still got to have Congress backing you to be able to, get the money out of politics, which was obviously what he wanted to do. But he couldn't do it single handedly as president. So what? Who's who? How can we be sure? I mean, obviously we can't, but how can we be optimistic in thinking that he would have pushed that agenda forward if Congress was already corrupt, which I'm sure they were by that time, and just wouldn't have it.
Well, I think you could see it this way. Obama beat McCain easily in the 2008 election. JFK would have destroyed McCain. I mean, it would have been such a landslide, probably like we haven't seen probably in a couple hundred years, if ever.
Well, yeah, probably.
Right? It would have just been a complete mismatch. So McCain gets destroyed and what happens, of course, is down the line ballot voting, you end up having a lot more of Congress that ends up being following along with JFK Jr. So most likely you have a pretty dominant majority. Not necessarily, but that's typically what happens, right? You have a popular president. You usually, at least in the first term, it also goes to the same party, or oftentimes. So
Right.
then they would have been able to enact campaign finance restrictions. Congress, it's a good point though, because unless there was an actual amendment, which I don't know if JFK Jr. was promoting, I don't think he was. I think he was just promoting more restrictions, but that could always get ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. I don't think
Right.
the Supreme Court would have done that because the only reason the Supreme Court did do that is most likely they were bribed and paid for, right? The Supreme Court has been accepting gifts from wealthy individuals for a very long time, certain people on the Supreme Court.
Right.
So
Right.
that probably doesn't happen either, but you could make an argument that maybe it still does.
And maybe McCain wouldn't even have been, he wouldn't have had to run against McCain. They would have brought somebody else up. I mean, there's so many different scenarios, different directions that could have gone, I guess, we could theorize about a lot of things, but man, um, there's no doubt had he run, he would have won. I mean, there's just no doubt in my mind that he would have won, but he still would have had to have a lot of support to push through his agenda. And uh, Mitch McConnell was in the Senate, and look at how many things he's screwed up since he's been there. And he would have, because he was the one that kept Obama from putting Merrick Garland in the Supreme Court, which I don't know if that mattered today, but
well, the only reason you had McConnell doing that, though, is because of the Tea Party. The Tea Party put so much pressure on regular conservatives like McCain and Romney and others. So the normal Republican Party pre-rise of MAGA was the Tea Party. And the Tea Party only rose to power because Obama was there. So the Republicans in Congress would have been just empty suits, and that includes McConnell.
That's true. So if Obama would have never been president, I mean, we'd have had a very huge culture shift in the way things are today. That's for sure.
Right? You wouldn't have people, Trump wouldn't have been able to leverage racism in our political system like he did. And culture wars probably come after that. These are just, step by step, the ripple effect.
Exactly. I agree. You're right.
Stunning, though, isn't it? Right. So, yeah, we can't say with any degree of high certainty, but it certainly seemed highly probable. I think that's not extreme to say. It's highly probable he either runs in 2007 for president 2008, or he ends up succeeding Obama in 2016. Because even if Trump, let's say Trump let's walk this through a little bit. If Trump comes to power or comes to relevancy because of birtherism in Obama, and JFK then runs in 2016 after Obama, even if Trump is promoting birtherism, does Trump beat JFK Jr. in 2016 versus Hillary, who also won the popular vote?
Not a chance.
Not a chance, right? I mean, the only reason Hillary lost for a lot of reasons. One, she, people don't like when I say this, but obviously it seems like America is not ready for a woman president yet.
No, there's nothing. No, that is a fact. That is a fact. And that's why all this up and up about AOC running for president, she'd be great, but this country is not mature enough to have a woman. It's just not going to happen right now.
Yeah, we're not quite ready. You could argue that there hasn't been obviously Kamala was qualified enough, in terms of qualifications. But when you have Hillary and Kamala who are just not well liked, and I know that's a ridiculous statement, but that's the fact of politics, is you have to have charisma and you have to be well liked to have a better chance of winning.
Well, Kamala started off really well. I mean, look at her rallies compared to Trump's rallies. I mean, that in and of itself got everybody thinking, oh, she's going to take this no problem. But then something happened, and it's like she leveled off, or somebody was whispering some things in her ear that changed the direction of her something. I don't even know how to articulate it, but something stepped in and pushed her in a different direction or something, because she started off really, really popular.
Well, it's strange. She's always been a little strange. When she has her A game and she can seem very strong and likable and, extremely, what's the word I'm looking for? Like when she grilled in the Senate, I forget who it was, using her prosecutor skills, she was brilliant, but oftentimes she comes off flat.
Right, exactly.
That was a problem. I'm going to invite another guest in here as well. You don't feel like you have to go. Stay here as well.
No, that's fine.
So I would say that, you could even argue, and I want to put it carefully in terms of Obama. If you wanted a woman president right now, clearly any woman is not going to do. It has to be someone truly inspirational and truly well-liked. You can make that same argument about a male black man.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
If it's not Barack Obama and is another black man who's just not as charismatic as Obama, then he has no chance of winning. Just like a female has no chance of winning unless you possess that charisma.
That's right. I mean, we got Jasmine Crockett's, AOC's. We got Katie Porter. No one talks about Katie Porter. That woman is a freaking firecracker.
She's a force. Yeah.
And Elizabeth Warren, you could argue she might be okay, but maybe her age is an issue. I don't know.
Yeah. What's up, Austin?
Make a note here.
Yeah, Austin, go ahead. I'll step down. I'll be quiet.
So I think that you made a comment saying, America isn't ready for a woman president. And I will admit, I am coming from the little bit that I've seen of what you've said. I'm coming from the other side of the political spectrum. And, I grew up as a farmer and have seen in New York, no less, and consistent Democratic policies or Democrat policies in New York are the reason I am as conservative as I am. But that notwithstanding, I think that the people that the Democratic Party has put up, or the women that they have put up to run for president, are the problem. It is not that they are women. It is specifically those women. Now, I lived in several states. I lived in New York when Hillary Clinton was in office here. And I also lived in California when Kamala Harris was Attorney General. And I can say that personally seeing how they act when given power is the reason I did not want them in office, in that office specifically. So I don't think that their gender is the issue. I think that the specific choices of the Democratic Party is the issue.
I think it's fair. I mean, I think, whatever you said, you can just boil that down to likability. Maybe that's a little too simplified.
I mean, no, you're right. You're right. It is. Hillary Clinton, now I have met her personally. I have had conversations with her. This is decades ago. But when you have a personal conversation with her, you ever meet someone and you talk to them and something is just off?
No, I know within seconds. I know I can judge a person's character within seconds.
Something about Hillary Clinton made my skin crawl. And I can't explain what it was. It was like, this sounds ridiculous, but it was like I was talking to a snake. And I have not liked her. I personally think that her husband is significantly more likable, as with all of his issues. I think that Bill Clinton is a more likable person.
Yeah.
And if you don't like someone, it's really hard to trust them. And I mean, we are being asked to trust someone with arguably the most important political office in the world.
Well, that's why I look at.
So that begs the question, man. What made you vote for a guy with Trump's past? I mean, the guy is.
I can answer that. I can answer that question very easily.
Well,
I was a business owner, small business owner, in starting in 2014, and I owned a construction company from 2014 to officially legally till about February of 21, and taxes. The reason I voted for him the second time was taxes. What he did for me the first time was, we're talking more than $10,000 between Obama's tax plan and his.
What tax bracket are you? Are you in the over 39% tax bracket?
So
you're only talking about capital. You're only talking about capital gains taxes of some kind, right?
No.
The federal taxes haven't changed. The rates haven't changed, have they?
So, when we went from the 2015 tax plan, the 2016 tax plan, which would have been the last year of Obama's tax plan, because the taxes fall a year later. I would have to pull all that documentation from a decade
let's
ago,
not go down that slope anyway. I don't like to go too deep into the issues anyway.
Yeah, I can't. All I remember is that there was a significant difference.
Well, here's the thing I would disagree. Here's the thing I would disagree with you, though. So I understand likability. I understand the likability. Mm-hmm. It's hard to trust someone that you don't like. I get that. Mm-hmm. And you're right. The women that the Democratic Party have put up have not been very likable to a large segment of America, whoever you classify mm-hmm. that as. Not everybody. Mm-hmm. But I would argue, you talked about looking into a snake with Hillary. Well, Trump may have a certain charisma for certain people, but he has been literally a snake oil salesman his entire life. He's been a grifter his entire life. He's stolen money from families, from contractors his entire life. So while I understand the likability part, I would challenge you to please reflect on your decision making. I understand taxes are an issue. I get that. But you need to vote for people's, even if you don't like them, I would hope most Americans would vote for people's policies like Hillary Clinton, who I do not like, who I never liked. She at least wanted promoting universal health care, which is a progressive view. In today's world, it's actually not very progressive. It's actually becoming pretty mainstream. And that is a policy that, whether I like her or not, it was actually something that would improve the lives of most Americans.
Yeah, and
it would have been a tax break.
I see your point of view from that, and I'll tell you why and this is mildly anecdotal, but I happen to be my family is connected with a college hockey team, and we do a lot of fundraising for them. At any given year, 85 to 90% of those players are Canadian. We happen to know all of their parents. And basically, we were warned against it.
Warned against what? Oh, universal health care?
Yes.
Oh,
letting
okay.
The government
Okay, time out. I have to set you straight a little. I play hockey. I played college hockey, and I have dozens of friends, spent many time in bars with people from Canada, hockey players in South Carolina and in New York. And I'm telling you that while you may have heard some anecdotal people talk about that, it is generally untrue. Most of the Canadians that I know actually go home to get their health care. So, and if you want to use that one anecdotal viewpoint, it is proven throughout 39 other countries that universal health care overall for its entire society is not only less expensive for everybody, but the level of healthcare in France, in Spain, in Germany, in Sweden, and in 38 other countries far superior to ours, except at the very highest levels. So I would dispute your anecdotal view with my own views, actually been a hockey player and am a hockey player, and talk to those same Canadians. So
I played hockey for 17 years.
Oh, cool.
So,
yeah, awesome. So the Canadian healthcare system does have some warts. But my argument to most people, so you know about universal health care, the way the United States could do it, meaning Medicaid for all, this is what the Democrats do a terrible job on telling people, is healthcare, universal healthcare, doesn't have to change anything other than who pays for it. So instead of private health insurance companies paying for your medical expenses, you can have the government paying for it, which we already do through Medicaid, meaning the doctors, the hospitals, the nurses, the pharmaceutical companies, none of that changes. It's just who's paying for it. You don't pay for it anymore. The government pays for it. And yes, you're paying it through your taxes, but ends up being a massive tax break to everybody. And that's something specifically on healthcare people don't understand, is that because you go to universal healthcare, you don't have to change much of anything of the entire system. All you have to change is who's the payer. And why do you want private health insurance paying for it?
Oh, because I'll tell you why.
For profit.
I think that the government shouldn't be involved with the federal government should be involved with absolutely nothing but defense, border security, and a few other oddball things. Because in my experience, working in the industry I do now, where all of the work I do is on government contracts, I think that the government has hands down the worst money handling habits of any entity that I've ever experienced. So why would I want them to control more of my money and more industries in general when they have proven in everything that they've meddled in that they do it worse?
Okay, maybe. So the reason you want government doing those things is because the function of government is completely different than a function of a for-profit healthcare company. Let me give you an example. Do you want roads? Do you want your roads? You can claim that building road infrastructure should be a lot less expensive than it is. Let's make that all right. Let's just assume that's plausible. Do you want roads to be privately owned?
privately owned?
You want your roadways to be privately owned. Or is that...
I'm not going to say I want them privately owned, but I will say that the government, like, okay, so that's exactly the industry I'm in. So in fact, I'm actually currently sitting in a dump truck right now.
Cool.
And so I do road construction. I do
See, I knew that. See, I have ESP and I just know these things.
And so I will get, there are so many basically the way that, like, I live in New York State, which is probably exaggerates the problem because New York State is absolutely atrocious.
It does.
The state is practically bankrupt. They won't admit it, but the state owes individual counties millions. Like my county specifically, they have defaulted on over $14 million in compensating social benefits. So things like medical expenses, and the state is not paying them. And it hasn't made the news yet, but it will. And so New York State is probably exaggerating the problem, but at least from my perspective. But they have more policies that dictate things that shouldn't matter than they do actually reducing the burden on the taxpayer.
Yeah, that's bureaucracy, right? That's what all governments and all large corporations have that as well.
Oh, I agree that it's a problem in the corporate world too, but I think that. Go ahead.
I just think you have to think differently. So I think your clear answer to do you want roads to be private is no, right? Because if they're private, then you got to have to pay to drive on them, and some private company for profit is going to try and milk you for as much as they can, right? So roadways, Department of Transportation, is inherently governmental. There's no denying that. If someone denies that, I would just say you're not rational, you're not sensible.
They're just being disingenuous.
You're right. You're just a lunatic because you're not thinking about the function of government. Now, you're also suggesting that, yeah, government really screws up money and mismanages money. It is also true. My argument would be well, it is inherently government, so there's no other solution. It can't be privatized. So now you only have to look at what can you solve, and you have to just make government more efficient. I'm not suggesting that government, even in the healthcare space, so whether it's roads, whether it's air traffic control, whether it's healthcare, police, schools, blah, 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 right? Some things are just inherently governmental, which makes us a social democracy, which we already are, which we have been since 224 years. So we are a social democracy. It just has to depend what things are inherently governmental. Roadways are absolutely governmental. And you have a lot of problems because you have your entire livelihood is based on, you're sitting in a dump truck right now and building roads. So you understand the nuances and the problems with it. Now, you should be skeptical of government. You should be frustrated with the government, but it doesn't mean there's an alternative solution. The only solution is how do we make government more efficient? And there's a simple answer to that as well, is you put better people in government who don't stay in power too long, who are actually serving the people, and all those problems it will always have bureaucracy. It always have some waste, but you have to target the waste and the fraud, right? And the bureaucracy. But there's no other solution.
And you just hit the nail on the head. It's the people. It's the people in the government. It's not the government that is the problem. It's the people running the government that is the problem.
Yeah, it's the people we elect, and because there's only two parties, and because those people, generally people who are in power, stay in power, right? And because of all the influences from these other private corporations. Now, there are many private corporations, as you know, Austin Z. I can't see your full username, but as you know, there are many private companies that build the roadways that are getting the government contracts. So those private companies are using fraud and bribery in other aspects, because we all know contracting and development in general is fraught with a lot of illegal activity. And government end up being played by those private corporations. So in combination with the bureaucracy of the government, in conjunction with excessive greed and no accountability by those private companies, you end up having this view over the last 20, 30 years, however long you've been in that business, of viewing that government is just really screwed up, right? And I can't trust the government anymore. And that makes sense.
And there is a, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. There is a path where I would agree to universal health care. There is something the government could do that would at least allow me to begin to trust them to handle that. And that is to start working to fix our healthcare system before you do that. There is no reason that I should sustain a head injury, go to a medical center, sit there for an hour, have someone shine a flashlight in my eyes, tell me they don't have the correct type of doctor there, send me home, and send me a bill for $1,500. Now, I had insurance. So I just didn't give them my insurance while I was there because I didn't actually get seen. I gave them my name, but I never actually made it to a room. This was all in an ER waiting room. If they can fix that problem, I can begin to think that maybe they can handle it. But so far, they're not fixing the problems they can fix. And so I have no reason to believe that if they were the ones, the intermediary instead of the insurance companies, that they would do anything to fix it then.
Well, that's a related problem, but that's not, if you're suggesting now, you're actually suggesting that government should go in and fix the actual healthcare system itself, private hospitals that don't have that staff for you. I mean, that is an internal industry problem.
Well, yes, it is. But I think that the government has the authority right now to take some measures to protect, or at least to force transparency.
See, that's the whole point of government, though, right? It's actually to protect its society. The whole reason you have government is to protect people. That's the whole basis of a democratic government. And it's obviously failing all of us, right? We all agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I think everyone can agree on that.
But the problem is that we are all being poisoned, that thinking that government is not the solution because they just mishandle things so poorly.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no other solution. So we have to start changing our mindset, realize government is the solution. So how do we get government to work better for us?
And here's another thing that I will state from a conservative point of view. Universal health care will never happen as long as Democrats push open borders. Because and I'll explain that. And I'll explain why those things are linked.
They've never pushed.
Please, can you, Austin, please answer no one's question. Who is pushing, tell me who's pushing open borders and what that means to you.
The defund ICE. I mean, there are people actively saying that we should defund ICE.
$180 million, 20% of our entire military budget is going towards ICE.
I understand that.
Why ICE is not, we have border control, border security patrol already. Why do we need ICE? Mm-hmm. So wait, well, actually, I'm getting off base. I don't want to go down this hole. Hold on. Let's just go back. Okay. So open borders. What do you mean by open borders? There has never been any legislation. Anybody inside the Democratic Party, except I think one congressperson may have mentioned it at some point, but there's been no legislation. So you need to talk about open borders.
Well, okay.
It doesn't exist.
Maybe that was a poor choice of words, saying open borders.
All right. So you're using a talking point that.
Why do Democrats resist immigration law enforcement as hard as they do?
It was a bipartisan bill that was supposed to be put into law, but Trump made a phone call and had it stopped because it was going to make the Democrats look good. It was ready to go, and he put the brakes on it. So there you go.
Right, 2023. So Austin,
do you have?
So I think we're losing you, Austin. Austin, we lost your connection for a moment. We'll just hang out for a minute. So
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. I was trying to look something up. Apparently, every time I close TikTok, or I
you can't do that.
TikTok, okay. So, do you have a bill number that I could look into that so I could have an idea of what you're talking about because I'm unfamiliar with this.
You don't remember when Biden and now it was a little late in his term, but nonetheless, they had a bipartisan bill that was supported by the Republican.
Ready to go. They had it. It was like literally ready to go, and Trump didn't want it to go through because it had made the Democrats look good and lessened his chances of getting elected. And so he had whoever he made phone calls to and had it sidelined or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't get out of here either, or I'll lose my spot here.
I'll look it up for you.
No, we're all in the same boat with that.
Yeah, what was the bill number?
So I can't look it up, but it's in fact it was a bipartisan bill. I don't know the bill number though, unfortunately.
So I do want to dispute this, Austin, just so you know, I'm a staunch independent, but obviously I have some progressive views. I also have some very conservative views, and I'll list them really quickly. I'm all for balancing the budget in a perfect world, reducing fraud and waste. I'm pro Second Amendment. I'm for firearm enforcement and firm enforcement of the border, and I'm against like teaching of gender stuff in schools and public things of that nature, right? So I have plenty.
I would definitely agree with you there.
I have plenty of conservative thoughts and leanings. However, when it comes to healthcare and other things and nonsense about open borders, the vast majority of Democrats, even liberals, want strong enforcement of the border. That's the misnomer. You might not be hearing it on Fox or on other platforms or by certain influencers.
I have not watched Fox News in over 10 years. In fact, I almost exclusively watch CNN, and I watch the other side.
Okay. So, but you know, like, I don't know if you know this then, that the most liberals are very much against, they want firm immigration border protection. So that is a fallacy that there are some people that, of course, want very lenient things. And there are people that want amnesty, which I also do believe there needs to be some sort of sensible amnesty because we do need immigration. So anyway, with these things, the open borders, you use that term. You heard it in many places. It's a hot topic term, but it is a complete fallacy and bullshit because the left does not want open borders. No one on the left wants that. Not even anything remotely like that. But anyway.
I mean, I guess there are, and this may be a more localized thing, but there are definitely trying to think of who it was, but that the story of infrastructure being built in Texas on the border that was it was a huge fight back and forth where the federal government wasn't allowing the state to enforce its own border, and this is back during Biden.
I think that had something to do with Texas, right?
Yes, and I also think that Biden was not at the helm during that time. It just from what you could tell from the outside, it seemed like.
Well, remember, all legislation comes from Congress. And by the way, it was Bill H.R. 15, that was negotiated by it was literally negotiated and designed by the Republicans and the Democrats. So Langford as the Republican and Murphy, a Democrat, and Sinema, an independent at that time, Arizona. Was it Arizona, right? Sinema? Yeah, Arizona. So anyway, so that was a bill put together by a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent that was endorsed by Biden and was endorsed by the Border Security. What's the name of the Border Security Control Agency? Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's
yeah.
But let's not go too far down the issues.
I just quickly Googled HR 15, and I think that we all can. I think that you will agree on this. That the biggest thing a government could do to ease the tension in our country right now is single issue bills.
I hear that sometimes. I don't think so. The ease the tension, I would disagree. Single issue bills are just not efficient enough. I think there's a better way to do that, but nonetheless, ease the tension has to do misinformation.
I'll give you the example. When you Google HR 15, what immediately comes up is all about gender equality and sexual orientation discrimination. So that's what reminded me of the
Oh,
issue.
take some
is
more
that-
time and look at it. Let's not. We would have to all dive into that
No,
deeper.
my point is that they mix so much unrelated crap in bills that you could be the big argument could be border security, but because they have just the most random crap mixed in with it, there are people that are going to vote no because of other things that are on the bill.
Yeah, that does happen. Sure.
But I unfortunately do have to get off here. I got to cook dinner.
All right.
So
have a great night.
Nice talking to you.
Government's
You too.
not the enemy. Remember, we have to figure out a way to make government the solution. See ya.
Mm-hmm.
Come back and talk with us, Austin, because I think you lend some good perspectives to this conversation.
I will try. Okay, I will follow you, so I have your
You've been on here before, have you not?
tag here. I don't think so.
Oh, I thought your username looked familiar. All right, but thanks for joining and thanks for following. We'll see you.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have a good day.
What's up, Mr. Global? We have someone else that wants to join. No one. Do you want to talk about anything that he mentioned?
No, I mean, I can hang out, and if something comes up that I want to chime in on, I will. Or if you need me to step off so you can put someone else in here.
No,
I
as long
will.
as everybody is cordial and being cool.
I did want to ask Mr. Global. You're not. There's a Mr. Global on Facebook, but he's a different guy, right?
Yeah, no, I've heard that before, but no, I'm not whoever that is.
Okay.
I'm not even sure who that is.
Yeah, you definitely don't look the same. So I was like, wow, am I missing something? But okay.
What does he what does he say? What does he stand for? Is he a weirdo or what?
No. He's way cool, and he hates Trump, and he hates MAGA, and I have a bunch of his videos on my that I put up on my TikTok if you want to check them out.
You're the only weird Mr. Global.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, I guess that's a badge I will wear with honor.
All right. Hey, Nanny, how are you? Thanks for all the fan clubs, by the way. If you haven't followed, please follow. Please tap the screen. We've had a really good discussion on JFK Jr. in the past. I went through that summary a couple times. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart in terms of how that we should be living in a parallel universe where JFK Jr. did not crash his plane and was still alive. But too bad that I picked the wrong universe to be living in.
Yeah, you articulated that really well. I think with very little refinement needed when you do your actual episode on it. It's going to be great.
Oh, I appreciate that. I felt like I did actually a terrible job, so I appreciate.
No. I sat here and learned stuff that I didn't know before that I thought I knew, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So you did really well.
Cool, thank you. Nanny, are you here?
Oh, Nanny.
All right, Nanny, I'll put you on mute. Nanny, we're here waiting for you if you want to join. I'll put you on mute in the meantime because I think we're getting feedback from Nanny's probably out in the garden.
I wonder what time it is where she's at. That's a late garden visit.
Yeah. All right, Tabitha, thanks for joining. Thanks for the confettis. Everybody, thanks for the likes and so forth. Should we continue at all about JFK Jr. or what was better to discuss about?
I did have a question I wanted to ask you, TK.
Yeah.
And I've noticed a pattern, and this isn't to be abrasive or to be like, I don't know, attacking you. But
I have a lot
was
of
just
patterns.
curious.
Yeah.
So I have noticed when certain people come up and they make suggestions, like for instance, the last guy said single issue bills. I've noticed that you do sometimes jump to like immediate denial of those things. And I guess, and maybe that's not like an overarching theme for you, but I'm more curious about like where you do stand as far as some of these other issues. Because you do approach things politically correct and this and that and the other, but I'm just kind of like, I wonder where you are at with certain things.
Well, like single issue bills in particular?
Like, yeah, that's one for sure.
But remember, you guys always remember my point is I would prefer, I'm not I don't mind talking about specific views, even if they're against someone else's views, right? I'm very firm with one of my views, and I'll try and convince you or anybody else that my views are correct. But I'll also keep an open mind to understand that my views may not be correct. But the problem with going too deep into views sometimes, which I don't avoid my views, but
Right.
I'd like to try and avoid distracting away from because it'll end up bringing us into a spiral of a drain, because I'd like to focus on the things that we can agree upon, all of us, meaning the 28th and 29th Amendment, right? Getting rid of money out of politics and making sure politicians can't be a career. So when it comes to healthcare, like, I'm very vocal about where I stand, because I'm standing on the what I'm 100% sure is the right thing. And then there are some things like single issue bills where, I haven't put enough thought into it, but I do have enough of an overview to suggest why I think that's a bad idea. In our representative democracy, not a direct democracy, in a direct democracy, we would always vote on everything, meaning all citizens. Very inefficient, because that means all citizens have to be knowledgeable about each and every issue. We don't have a direct democracy. So in a direct democracy, voting on single issue bills makes a lot of sense. How I view it in a representative democracy is, because you have lots of representation, there has to be a lot of things done at once. Now, I am opposed to, if it's an immigration bill, that you also have something that's completely unrelated to immigration. But many times having single issue bills can have other things in it, but maybe they shouldn't. So maybe the last caller was right. I'm just suggesting we're getting so far into the weeds when we talk about single issue bills are not the root cause of what the problem is in our government. It can be another symptom, and it could be a problem, and we need to clean that up as well. But we're getting so far into the weeds. All I'm suggesting on those things, it's not the answer. It's just, it's something that's so less relevant than other things that we need to focus on first.
Understood.
Here's one to discuss. How can we get rid of the Electoral College?
It's a tough one, right? Well, it's actually pretty easy. It would happen naturally, right? If enough of how many states that are trying to do, the states combine their votes into the Electoral College, and it would basically be the popular vote. So basically, there's X amount of states that would assign their electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote. So you don't actually have to have all 50 states to agree to it. You just have to have that. I forget the name of it right now, but I'll look it up in just a second. There's a certain amount of states that are trying to combine their electoral votes, and that says that if the popular vote wins, our electoral votes will go that direction. That's something that we can do. That's the easiest path to get rid of the Electoral College. If that's something you want to do.
And
I
also,
agree with that.
what about expanding the number of senators? It's so lopsided right now. Here I live in California, and we still only get two senators. And a tiny little state that's not even as big as Los Angeles gets two senators. How can we? Is that a problem that needs to be addressed?
Maybe, but not anytime soon. The Constitution and our system is two senators. We're already talking about a massive lift of like the 28th and 29th Amendment, right? Already two enormous things. The more we tack on to that, the less likely any of it can happen. So you can make an argument that two senators for California is not enough, but there's so many ramifications that have to be thought about. Listen, the Constitution took 11 years to come to ratification. It took the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers. That type of discussion would be something that we need to discuss probably for a decade, because we can't always understand the ramifications of things. We know that the system actually does work really well. If you just removed all the money out of the system and all the billionaires and all the corporate special interest, those things would be so much less relevant today. I'm not saying it would fix everything, but I'm just saying they would cease to seem problematic.
I understand. I mean, we could split California into thirds, and then we'd have 6 senators.
Yeah, but how does we all would have to think, not we, like people who, like literal scholars and constitutional experts, because the more you try and people always talk about, let's burn it down, let's create something new, let's go to digital, let's make it all technology based, all these other ideas. I'm not saying that they're terrible ideas, but going from an idea to an actual executable sort of product is just a chasm that's so large there that we already have this amazing document, this amazing form of government that is not the problem. It's the
You're
people
right.
in
You're
government,
right.
right?
And I actually wanted to address that with you because keeping in mind that yes, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, all that, excellent documents, but they still can't live in a vacuum. We need to not have them be static documents. They need to be living, breathing, amendable, adjustable. The Second Amendment's a perfect example. That Second Amendment was created when we had muskets and muzzle loaders and look what we've got now. And it just needs to be, I think it needs to be updated.
Well, actually, it doesn't. It's just the interpretation is the problem, right? As a Second Amendment supporter, not in the way you might think, um, the Second Amendment starts, if you just understand your grammar, it's 27 words. The Second Amendment is literally 27 words. And I don't know all 27 off the top of my head, but it's in a well-regulated militia, comma, something, 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 comma, something, something, something. It's all related to a well-regulated militia. And militias back then were basically the same thing as state, what are they called? State National Guards. National Guards today. That to translate from militias into National Guards. It's just a translation of what people have made it. But even with that said, by the letter of the words, the Second Amendment doesn't mean what most people on the right think it means.
And that's the problem because they always leave the militia part out. Well, yes, you have the right to bear arms in order to form a militia,
Right.
not just because you want to have guns.
Right. It doesn't say individuals have the right to bear arms. It says a well-regulated militia. But even so,
Thank you.
But even so, think about the ramifications. The American culture has a strong history of guns. It has a deep culture of guns, and guns are still incredibly important to people in rural areas, specifically when it comes to good reasons to have firearms. And that culture, even though you could definitely make an argument that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to what's happening with the lack of gun control, it's still, I think all of us as Americans, even those people who would want guns to be banned, have to realize that you're not ever going to do that in the United States of America. It's our culture is too deeply rooted in guns. That doesn't mean like 89% of the people want federal background checks. That we have to start there because that vast majority of people want. And I believe if the right felt like they were in control or gun owners felt like they had more voice, they would help put in systems in place. They're just influenced by gun manufacturers and ammo manufacturers and the NRA and the boogeyman, right? They're just influenced by the boogeyman, so they don't do anything. And the left is always the one, suggesting legislation. And then the right is always suggesting that the left is coming for your guns, which it's not. But anyways, we have a strong history in guns. The Second Amendment is written in a way that should not allow individuals maybe to have guns. But even with that said, I believe individuals should have guns because of our culture being so strong. So I know that's hypocritical based on the rule of law. It is a hypocritical viewpoint. But I don't ever see, I think passing the 28th and 29th Amendment is a lot easier than doing that. And I don't think we should go there.
I agree.
Yeah, that's a passionate talking point for a lot of people.
Yeah, and we have to, and I always suggest to Democrats is try and lean pressure on the NRA, or actually that's the whole point of the 28th Amendment. If you get the 28th Amendment in there, the NRA and all these gun ammunition manufacturers, they all go away. They don't become relevant. Now you can have actually honest discussions between representation of the people by the people to actually figure out, how do you reduce school shootings? How do you reduce violent gun deaths? And it can encompass there's ways to do it. Many other countries have figured this out that have guns, right? There are other countries that have guns that don't have the level of crime that we have. So there are solutions. The solution doesn't have to be that guns need to be banned in the United States like they were in Australia. That's just not going to happen here.
No, that's taking it a little extreme, but it needs to be dialed back. I mean, there's just no viable reason that I can think of that an individual needs to own, an AR-15, for example. It just what? Why do you need an AR-15 to go deer hunting? I don't think so.
Just because it's cool. It's just because it's cool. Because you see it when you're a kid and you're like, ooh, I want one of those when I get older. And then you go get one.
I like shooting. I enjoy shooting. You know
Yeah.
what I don't enjoy? Shooting and realize that was $3. That was $3. That was $3. That was $3. And I think, who's getting my $3? Oh, that fucking ammunition company is getting that $3. So I don't like shooting just because every time I'm shooting, I feel like I'm just pissing away my money because how egregious the cost of guns and ammunition has become.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then you got the people that actually make their own ammunition, but they're still buying those things from those same manufacturers. So
Right.
it's very expensive. I'll give you that.
It's insanity, the cost. And it's just like prescription drugs. I promise you, the ammunition buying in Ukraine is not nearly the cost it cost us.
True.
yeah, I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole because I know you're passionate about healthcare. First thing they need to do is quit calling it healthcare and call it what it is. It's sick care.
Yeah. Well, it's always
You
been
know,
known as universal health care, right?
if we devoted half the attention that we do to our for-profit insurance companies and all that other nonsense into actually educating people on what healthy food is and getting rid of some of this crap that people eat, maybe we wouldn't be so sick in this country and we wouldn't need so much pharmaceutical drugs. We wouldn't need so much quote unquote health care if we were healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Look it up on GPT. I think there's 18 ingredients, 15 or 18 ingredients that are completely banned in most European countries that are found commonly in every one of our foods, from
I know,
gums
right?
to
What's
nitrates,
up with that?
and they're
It's almost
carcinogens. Several of them are
it's
carcinogens.
almost like it almost makes you ask the question: is the manufacturers of that stuff and the for-profit insurance companies and the medical industry, are they in bed together? Are they got something going on? You know what
No,
I'm
I'll tell
saying?
you exactly. I actually know the story to this, specifically when it comes to dairy and meats and others. So early in the days, I said, oh, what's the name of the organization, the agency that controls? It's the FDA. FDA now.
USDA? No.
It is the USDA. So is the USDA what? Okay, I'm going to go very paraphrasing here on some abstract. I don't know the details, but basically,
USDA does the beef, I think.
in healthcare and in food care, there's an enormous amount of contributions that have been given to government agencies back in the 1940s and 50s. I think, why can't I think of it? Anyway, it's the influence of big money in private industry within our government agencies. So many of our leaders of department heads in many government agencies come from those industries. Used to be former CEOs, used to be former executives, and they end up coming into government and serving their best interests, right? So they're basically placed in those spots because they have expertise, because they're coming from that industry. But they're being paid by those industries in various ways, right? To represent those industries that they come to line their pockets. So our government agencies that are supposed to be protecting us, like the FDA and USDA and so forth, end up being so manipulated and infiltrated by these so-called industry experts that are actually working in their best interest. So why do we have these 18 ingredients that we all know shouldn't be in our food either? It's because our government agencies don't have the power, literally don't have the power to enact legislation or even propose legislation to Congress to pass. So they end up because if you have a USDA, you expect them to come to Congress and say, hey, we should do X, Y, and Z because you have a whole big US department of the USDA. But if they're infiltrated by industry for-profit interests, it will never get to Congress.
How do they not have like a fiduciary responsibility to us? Like,
Supposed
Yeah,
to, right?
well, anytime you have for-profit anything, that always leads to corruption. It always leads to problems. I mean, it's just you can't have one without the other, right?
Well, that has to be the separation of when you have, look at the inauguration of Trump, and you had all the Silicon Valley billionaires literally in the first row and government officials behind them.
Right?
There is no
I was
separation between government and for-profit industry.
when I saw that, I immediately knew. I was like, this is a shit show. I was like, are you serious? You're gonna put these guys up front?
Yeah.
I was flabbergasted. I was like,
Well,
what is going on
they always
here?
present themselves as government should work more as like a business, like Elon Musk coming in for Doge. We can come in and help you clean things up. Oh, fuck you! You can. You cannot. You have no interest in doing what's best for society. You're a for-profit organization. It's an inherent conflict of interest of the objective of the what the government is supposed to do, protecting people. There needs to be so much space between for-profit industries and government. And the only difference is where people get into socialism because they don't understand what socialism means. There are socialistic programs. When something is inherently governmental, Department of Transportation, air traffic control, fire departments, police departments, these are things that you don't want for-profit industries because we will, you got to call the police and you got to worry about getting a bill. That's why people don't go into an ambulance these days, is because, oh, I ain't going to the ambulance. I'll cut my leg off and walk to the hospital first, right? These things are inherently governmental and they make no sense. So some things are inherently governmental. Whether you believe the government can do it well or not is irrelevant. They
I,
absolutely should be governmental.
Agreed. Agreed.
I thought it was amazing. There's a lady on TikTok right now, or I think she might even be a doctor, but she's calling different, I think it's hospitals or different places that are, providing medical care or whatever. And she's having them price out what the cash value or the cash price is for certain procedures. And then they give you the comparison between what the insurance number is compared to the person that's paying out of pocket. And it's like a third, if not less, than the other. I'm like, okay, so I'm paying each month for insurance. I have a deductible. I have to meet, I got to pay up to $5,000 until they cover something, but I'm still paying each month. And I have to, it's like, when you did the math, I'm like, why does anybody have this in the first place? This doesn't make sense.
Right? Hey, Tabitha, have to feel like death to go to a doctor. Yeah. Hey, by the way, if you ever want to come on the show and hang out with us, you're welcome to it. I love seeing you here, but you're always welcome to join us as well. I pay out of pocket. Yeah, I used to pay out of pocket as well. Like, is the healthcare industry the only thing where you don't have to have a menu with your prices on it? Like, really, have you
And
ever
then
bought anything that doesn't have a price on it?
yeah, it's like, oh, this is the price. Too bad.
Well, you realize that doctors don't call them patients anymore; they call them customers.
Right.
You knew that, right? That's true.
It's sad.
Yeah, that's why. And that's why I'm glad that rural America and many Republicans are starting to see the light. I think I still need to do a better job. The Democrats need to do a better job talking about. You're just You're just getting rid of for-profit healthcare insurance companies. Fuck the insurance companies. Insurance companies are another one. Even when it comes to like home insurance, for-profit home insurance. So if my house burns down in a forest fire or by a tornado, and then they decide not to cover it or don't cover it to what they're supposed to cover it because of all sorts of technicalities. Like, why are we putting for-profit insurance companies on a pedestal? Like, why would anyone want to protect a for-profit insurance company? It makes no sense from a society point of view. This is not like someone who sells gummy bears like Haribo and buying a candy. That should be for profit, right? These are some inherently governmental or inherently societal: food, transportation, healthcare, maybe to some extent housing, right? There's like you can't let
Yeah, that's a basic need to
these are
have
all
a roof
basic
over
need.
your
Anything
head.
that's a basic need: transportation, healthcare, food. Like That's what Europe does with their groceries and other things. They make sure that those for-profit grocery companies are limited on how much profit they can make. So when there's COVID and everybody thinks it's inflation, but it's really just the markup increasing, the profit margins increasing by corporations, Europe would never let that happen because in European countries, being more socialistic, but still capitalistic, make sure that those things are inherently governmental and they protect their society. That's why I've put the unsung heroes of our society. When I tell my son all the time, when I see someone doing a low waged job and they're doing it well, like they're the heroes of society. Someone who's stocking your grocery store for minimum wage or a little bit more, whatever it might be, like they're the heroes. When I go to Europe and I watch grocery store people, they actually have a career. It's not like some stepping stone. These people are dressed nice. They're working in the grocery store and they're totally okay. And you know what? They can go home to an apartment that they actually can afford and they can eat out once in a while. They have public transportation, so they may not need a car. So they treat even the people who are working in the grocery stores are living a good life. They're not looking at it like, I just got to be here just to make a few money and I'm going to go to my next job and go to my next job and hope to be able to put food on the table. Like that is and we need grocery store workers. We need people in McDonald's. And they shouldn't have to feel like they need to have 3 jobs in order just to survive.
My mother has she works for a company and one of her employees is homeless. And so this year she invited her over for
Oh,
Thanksgiving.
that's awesome.
And I don't know her story, but she has 2 jobs. She goes to the library during the day to stay warm, and then she goes to a shelter, I guess, to
Mm.
sleep. And I mean, she tells me, she's told me how much she makes and at her store, which I imagine is probably not a ton. And it's just like to be caught in that cycle. I kind of maybe was gifted or blessed with maybe my upbringing and what I'm doing now, but I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be like that, you know. It's just scary. You're like a plastic bag floating in the wind. And you're like, when is this going to be over?
Yeah, and in the richest country on the planet, that's happening. That shouldn't. It just in a sane society that wouldn't be happening.
In a
It
society where you
shouldn't
had
be.
representation for the people by the people, it would never happen.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It's really that we all get distracted by other things, and I know there's no other way to say it, but like I try and emphasize it so much when I'm speaking is like it's not just some words on a page. It's like you literally people need to think more deeply because they're so used to getting fighting about immigration or about healthcare or about something else and realize I just want my representatives not to represent me, just to represent us. I
Right.
Yeah.
don't want to see Silicon Valley billionaires walking into the White House every day. I don't want to see them chuckling and making secret deals in front of cameras. I want to see our representatives working closely with the president and those representatives knowing that they haven't been there for 50 years or they haven't, and they're not enriching themselves through insider stock trading or whatever it might be. Like
Exactly.
all those things go away. It's just incredible. Like the problem is so simple to fix. It's not easy to fix, right? But it's straightforward to fix.
It's a simple idea. It's just executing it is not going to be simple.
Right. It's going to come with a lot of complexities and legal hurdles and so forth, but it's still straightforward. And like you said, even the complexities go down the more people that support it. Like it ends up having a massive amount of momentum. So if you're worried about having enough money to do it, well, if you have enough people who want to do it, the money is going to be a fraction. It's going to be very easy to get if you need money, which you will at some point.
I know you've talked about like the 28th and the 29th Amendment, but I think almost like 90% of our issues as a country too. I mean, if people just made a livable wage, I don't know, enough to put some money away, food, a vehicle or whatever, I
Yes.
think a
I'm sorry.
lot of the issues that we have would just kind of start to fizzle away because people
Well,
feel
that would help.
secure.
That would help. A living wage would definitely help. But who gets to decide what a living wage is? It's so subjective. What's it based on? Is it based on where you live? Is it based on how you live? But the other side of that coin needs to be this problem we have with the wealth gap, with the that that these Elon Musks and these Jeff Bezos need not exist in our society. There is absolutely no sane reason that one individual needs to have that much money. It just is not necessary.
It was recently I saw something. It was like back in the 1800s, or I can't remember the timeline, but basically it was like there was 9 billionaires in the entire world. And then as of like the last 20 years, we now have like 3,000. And it just like the influx of people hoarding cash. And then you start pointing the fingers like, okay, this doesn't make sense.
But see, none of them, not a single one of them, has earned it fairly. Whether
Well,
it's
you have to take advantage of somebody in order to have that much money.
right, well,
Period.
not just take advantage of them in sort of like normal exploitation. You're not just,
Yeah.
of course, all companies exploit you can look at it as exploitation, but there's a level of exploitation that's considered sort of normalized and versus extreme exploitation. But not a single billionaire has gotten to become a billionaire without, or I wouldn't say billionaires. In today's world, if you sell your company for $1 billion, you shouldn't be a billionaire because like I have to pay 30x%. So that billionaire should pay their 30x%, but they don't. They pay capital gains on it, or they keep their money in stocks and they put it into something else. And there's all these different loopholes that they prevent. So you're right, Noah. I'm never against someone becoming very wealthy as long as it's been done so in a fair manner. But if you did that, no one would have $100 billion. Probably no one would have 50 billion or even 10 billion, because like it's supposed to be, people think like a fair tax is like everybody pays equal. Oh, that's not fair. We all used to think like that when we were in our 20s. Hey, everybody should just pay 10% and it would just be fair and equal. That's not how that's not how economics works. Progressive, right? The more you make, the more you have to pay.
Yeah, flat tax has never been a good idea.
Yeah, it's one of those simple things that a lot of people think, oh, it makes sense because it's fair tax. It's not a fair. It's actually completely unfair.
Right, you're right. But what about a user tax? In other words, all the things that are used need to be taxed because everybody uses everything. But how would that work?
Well, like using what?
Elaborate.
Yeah.
Or if we want to, I'm trying not to think about going backwards, but I keep in my mind reverting back. And I've learned this there's a guy named Richard Wolff, very, very smart economist. You ought to watch some of his videos.
I have. You mentioned him last time, and I actually have seen some of his stuff.
The guy is phenomenal. The way he lays things out, and the democracy at work, and all the stuff that he's got going on is. Look up Mondragon. That's anyway. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but my point was, and I lost my point. Damn it.
Again, a lot of solutions. I would say let's just go backwards to the way things were in 60s and 70s, making sure that.
Yeah. So, and you've talked about this several times. That back in the 50s, the top tax rate was 97%.
I thought it was 90. I don't think I've ever seen 97. Is there 97?
It started FDR when he first wanted it to happen. He wanted it to be 100%. So everything, anybody who made, I'm just throwing a number out there because I don't remember the number. You'd have to look it up. $50 million, for example. Anything over $50 million, you paid 100% tax on it. But then, that wouldn't fly. So I think it went to either 97 or 93. I can't remember now. But the top tax rate was like 93%. So that meant that for every dollar that you made over a certain amount, you got to keep 6 cents and the government got 94 cents or something to that effect.
Yeah, the last time I looked in the 60s, it was 90%, 89 to 90%, the highest tax rate. And that was for anyone earning over $4 million a year in the 60s,
right,
which today that equates to like 30 to 40 million, earning 30 to 40 million.
And what's wrong with that? What would be, obviously those that make that much will never have it. the Republicans went to work real hard after FDR did all the New Deal and everything to dismantle that whole thing, and they've done a pretty damn good job of it.
Yep.
I'm kind of I take the utilitarian approach to it, and what do you actually provide to society? I think taxes should be based on what you're giving to the people for utilization. Like, I
So
don't think
contribution to society would be. That makes sense.
I think that's where my mind goes. Like, are you building houses for people? I feel like there should be, a sliding scale as to like who's actually making society turn.
Well,
Well,
Like, I don't.
you see
that
what
would
we
cover
can what we
all the hedge fund managers and all the guys on Wall Street would need to go away then, wouldn't they? Because they don't contribute nothing to society.
see. Here's what
It
we can do in our
almost
current government,
right.
though. Regulation and this is, when people talk about the redistribution of wealth, loaded term. But if people, there are certain things that we talked about that are inherently governmental, right? And certain government programs always are supposed to lose money. They're supposed to lose money in order to, ideally, you would invest in society and hopefully that would pay itself back. But that's not, every government program can't be like that. Like roadways, building infrastructure actually does pay itself back when it's done well, right? So you spend enormous amount up front, it increases commerce and many other aspects, and it actually comes back through taxes in ways that sometimes are hard to measure, but it always works out. That a lot of people don't realize that. But what you can do without, again, changing the structure too much is if you have someone if the truly wealthiest people are paying their taxes, like I always talk about, there's $2 to $3 trillion left on the table that billionaires and corporations are not paying into the system. Now, if you're building something like houses, which is something that should be contributed to by the government, so you are doing something good for houses, maybe you should get some sort of supplement or tax break. So this is something that representation for the people by the people. If we need more housing for people, the people who go out and decide, so you don't have to change their tax structure necessarily, or you could give them tax breaks. It's one mechanism. But like farmers often get subsidies, right? If their crops are bad for a certain year, but we need agriculture, they get reimbursed by the government through a subsidy if the crop year was really bad or so forth. So there are a lot of ways within the existing capitalistic system and using our regulatory powers in Congress where we can reward and supplement through our taxation. So if you're taxing a corporations at 30% again, like it used to be, and you have an extra few $1 trillion coming in a year, maybe you should use that to help more contractors build more housing and give them a bigger opportunity to succeed.
And I think the youth would, if they learn that, hey, we're not going to tax you as much if you go into this industry, I think they'd want to maybe, I mean, we were 600,000 jobs short for construction jobs, right? And the DOD has come out to say that it's a national security risk.
Right.
And I mean, you have to structure the tax system to incentivize and punish what you do and you don't want. So I don't want more OnlyFans girls or guys, making a crap ton of money while I'm over here slaving away to provide a service for somebody to fix their house or to do whatever. I feel like the scales need to be weighted to actually benefit what we're trying to do here, which is not to create a bunch of people that are sitting in their house without any clothes on. But anyways,
But again,
that's just
a more efficient government would ebb and flow and fix those things as it needs to. Right? You go too far right, then you go too far left, and you, as long as you have representing the people, everything kind of continues to be the balance. We have someone new
It's a
here.
sliding scale. Yeah, it's a sliding scale, right? You adjust it. But
Yeah.
anyways,
There are no permanent solutions in a democracy. Everything is just, what's the next thing we have to fix? What's the next problem we have to solve? Like,
it's supposed to be fluid.
right.
It's not, what did no one say? Static,
It needs to
right?
be just like abortion and gun rights, where it's supposed to be fluid and ever change. Oh, wait, sorry. We've been arguing about the same shit for 60 years.
Quit that.
Hey, Luca, how are you? Luca, you're up. I asked you to join. You're welcome to join, you're on mute. If you can hear me, just join in whenever you're ready. And if you want to respond to something that we're talking about. So Tabitha, God forbid we actually do something helping people, right? Like helping homelessness. Like this one gets under my skin a lot because this is not uniquely American, right? You get this problem in Europe and other places as well. Homelessness, but there's a direct correlation to wealth inequality in homelessness, right? And like you said earlier, no one having the richest country in the world, richest, most powerful country in the world, that we have homelessness is absurd.
I mean, sometimes though you have to be careful too with those individuals. Like, did they get themselves into that position through their bad habits, gambling, drug addiction, or whatever? But I mean, there should be at least a place for those people to go. Like, I don't know, I envision these large plots with, modest size houses on it, not huge McMansions. Maybe they're kind of cookie cutter, but they're self-sufficient. But it has been a dream of mine to try to create a place or build a place to help those people, you know?
A lot of those, we'd have to do more study on it. A lot of those issues do stem from mental illness, from addictions, from gambling addictions, obviously PTSD in the military. But other countries have solved this. We can absolutely solve it. Just like universal healthcare, people talk about, oh, the government won't do it right. There's like dozens of countries that are doing it really well. All we have to do is look what they're doing. It's not that hard.
Which country? Okay,
and everybody
what's their
says,
number?
but
let me
look
call
at
them up.
Canada. Well, we don't have to do it like Canada is doing it. We can take little bits and pieces from each country that's doing it correctly and some kind of hybrid system. But I don't know, we got something now called Medicare, and it works pretty good. It could be improved, but why can't we have, like Bernie Sanders says, Medicare for all? That's a very simple system. It's run very efficiently. The overhead is very low.
Yep.
What's the problem? Well, we can't have that because look at all the people that work for the insurance companies that would be out of a job. Oh, well.
Go build houses. Become a plumber.
Find another job.
Right.
You don't, I mean, come on. That just can't be an excuse for not having like you say, what every other industrialized country has, and we don't. And we have the worst the worst health outcomes out of all of them. So why? I don't know.
I think per capita, is it 5 or 10 times more than like France? So France, I think, has always had typically the best healthcare system. And I think per capita, we're allowed per person, we spend about 10 times, let's say 5 to 10 times more per person on healthcare than France does.
Right.
It's obscene. Now, I do spend a decent amount of time in parts of Europe as well. And it's funny thing is because some European countries would be so darn healthy, but they also have a lot of bad cultural histories, like how much smoking there still is in Europe. And obviously we fixed that just by suing the tobacco companies and making sure they can't market. So like, it's funny, like you look at how well they eat and how well they walk and how much they exercise, but then they do like smoking and massive amounts of drinking and some other things. So they end up only living a little bit longer than us on average, but they still get cancers and so forth. So sometimes I just smack myself, like humans are so freaking stupid. They have great healthcare and they still do this shit.
How long do we really want to be here, though? Like, 100 years is topping it for me. You know what I mean?
Well, it's not how long you want to be there. It's like how healthy do you want to be to the end? That's what matters.
It's not about how many years. It's about the quality of life that you have while you're alive.
Right. How many 60-year-olds do you know that will live to 85 that have no quality of life and they're going to have 25 years of misery? Right. Exactly. There's a lot of those.
Exactly.
I mean, we can call up Europe and be like, hey, what can you give us your schematics for what your food industry is? We need to know which ones to take out of our system and call them up.
I don't think we're in any position to be asking for help from anybody right now. We are like the scum of the earth to everybody else right now because of thanks to who.
We can flip that narrative really quick, though.
Okay, well, let's do that. Let's do that. How are we going to do that? Because we got 3 more years of this bullshit.
Together. We're gonna do it together.
Okay, I'm there. I'm there. Let's do it.
There's events that can happen. We talk about the one event right here. Think about how this event changed history forever, right? So there are other events that can move the other way. The pendulum can swing. It's just think about your life. I always tell my kids this all the time. They're working hard. Some kids are struggling. Some are doing better than others. And every day they feel like they're not moving away. But they have to be opportunistic and keep their eyes wide open. Because if you look at the things that have changed your life, it's usually little moments in time, meeting a specific person or something happening where you ended up moving off onto a different course. So things aren't always linear in terms of improvement or in change. I can recognize my entire life is like three events that have completely changed the direction from being unsuccessful, successful, blah, 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 whatever it might be, moving to a certain place. So you just have to be, these things can change. Like I know we're all pessimistic about a lot of things, but that's why I try and do what I'm doing. That's why you guys are here. That's why we're all like, there's something that could happen, a trigger. There's these trigger moments that happen throughout our lives that change things. And we're witnessing one with healthcare. I think we're witnessing it. It's not like an immediate trigger, but I can see it on the right. People are not fighting about healthcare anymore. I don't know if that trigger was AOC and Bernie over years, but it seems like the narrative on the right is like, let's not talk about healthcare because we kind of know like a lot of our people are abandoning ship and they agree with this one. So let's talk about what else can we divide people? Let's talk about ICE and immigration because they don't want to talk about healthcare, right?
I
No,
mean, I think, yeah, go ahead.
they want to keep us fighting amongst ourselves, so they're going to come up with all these divisive issues like transgender things and all that. Because if we're distracted fighting amongst ourselves, then guess what they get to do? Keep going to the bank.
Yeah. And there are a lot of forces right now that are manipulating our government to continue the things move in the wrong direction. But that doesn't mean we can't change it.
Well, let's hope the midterms are what we hope they're going to be, because right now that's our first stopgap. That's the next big thing, I guess.
I wasn't too knowledgeable because I forgot since 1999 what JFK Jr. stood for. But when I did my research today on some of the other things, I can fill in the gaps of the things I didn't know. I was surprised that even back in 1999, that his leading thing that he cared about politics was campaign finance reform. That was before Citizens United. So everybody talks about Citizens United was the turning point where everything went to hell. No. It was like the last straw that completely opened up the floodgates. But campaign finance restrictions were being eroded since 1974, right? Just like the taxation changes have been happening since the 70s as well. Lots of all the consumer protections, civil rights protections, taxation protection, literally fair taxation. These things have been changing since the 70s, and it's all been manipulation by the greedy and the rich and powerful. Like each has been a step. And like we talked about trigger points, Buckley versus Vallejo when it comes to campaign finance reform. There were like something happened in the Reagan years, something happened in the Clinton years, and then of course there was Citizens United by the Supreme Court during the Obama years. So anyway, those are like, there's these moments in time and now the floodgates are open. I don't know where I was going with that, but
I think it just goes back to your point that that's the immediate pressing issue, right?
yeah, that's
To
right.
get that out.
His junior, that was his issue even in 1999, that he saw that erosion happening since the 70s. He was 38, so he wasn't like a little kid. So he already had 10 or 15 years of witnessing what was happening during the Reagan years, during the Bush years, and during the Clinton years. Even Clinton was not immune to doing the wrong thing here. So he already saw the direction, and he could have not given a shit, right? He's JFK Jr. He's got Kennedy money. He's got a compound off on Massachusetts. He could have not given a shit about any of that shit, but he lived a relatively regular life in New York City. He didn't have bodyguards and any of that stuff, right? He was just trying to be a normal dude, even though he came from an incredibly wealthy family. And that was thanks to Jackie, his wife, his mom, who really just raised him really, really well.
Well, I mean, um, he had prominence, right? And he also pulled at the heartstrings of Americans, right? They witnessed him as a young boy, the trauma that he experienced, and everybody felt that because they can assimilate with it. Um, and there's more people like that out there. They're just maybe not. They're just not at everybody's everyday peripheral, doom scroll type thing. Where even the average American has the similar stories. We're just all hidden in plain sight.
What was the name of the Russian opposition leader that was murdered a couple of years ago? Navalny.
Oh,
Navalny. Navalny was Russia's JFK Jr.
how do you come to that conclusion?
Not by birthright, by what he stood for as a decent human being. So he was, he was the equivalent of, because he was incredibly pro-Russian, right? He was a true patriot, Navalny. He was also had wealth. He could have moved to London and stayed in London, but instead he returned to Russia in order to oppose Putin and he wanted to solve Russia's cultural problems and political problems, and he wanted to change the direction of Russia. And JFK Jr., similarly, Navalny obviously wasn't born into like the JFK Jr. situation, but they were like these individuals. When Navalny died, it almost extinguished all hope for future Russian reform. Like not all hope, but almost. Like the likelihood that Russia can reform into some sort of international non-pariah state because of how much of a mafia state it is, and it's all based on corruption from the FSB and security services and so forth. The likelihood that it can ever be reformed is very slim because you needed a highly charismatic leader that was full of integrity and trustworthiness, and he could have done it. And JFK saw the same thing happening where we were moving towards. And again, this is pre-Obama, pre-birthism, but he already saw problems in the United States, that the core problems, like I always preach about, right? The problems with money and politics. So I equate them as sort of similar figures in their respective worlds because they had the most opportunity to course correct their countries. And JFK Jr. most likely would have done that for us. Navalny would have done that for Russia. And instead, we're now left with both countries and many other countries, India, China, so forth, with these narcissistic sociopaths, some of them psychopaths, depends on the issue. It depends on the leader, I mean, right? So now we have what we have, right? Again, it comes down to a people problem, like no one said earlier, right? This is not a government problem. This is a people problem. That's it.
Well, but nothing lasts forever. No one lives forever. So at some point they're gonna have to wake up and be like, we've got to maybe shift this in a different direction because they have no idea what they're doing. Like,
remind me to talk about this with Rick the next time he's on, because I was annoyed at myself that I didn't challenge him yesterday on this. So when he was talking about China and communism, right? And China's so great. And what Rick fails to realize, and I wish he was here, and maybe he is here, but so I'll talk to him about this, is that Xi is China's version of Trump. Different personality types, but they are both cult of personalities. Xi, Trump, Rick talks about communism as a system, and he thinks that China has a communistic government, and they're moving towards that. And obviously, it's a socialistic society or socialism economy. But the problem is, no one lives forever, like you said. And Xi is not a communist leader. He is a cult of personality. He is an authoritarian. He has done what other authoritarians have done, is if you don't agree with him, they end up ostracizing you or just kick you out of the government. So there is no like representation in China. There is an authoritarian, and he's a cult of personality, and his name is Xi.
I would argue that Kim Jong-un is even more so that.
Yes.
North Korean leader. Yeah.
But he's had that he's had the benefit of generations. His father did it for him, and now he's just
Right.
taken over, right? So now it's a family monarchy, or it's a family. What's the right term? It's not a monarchy.
drivers.
It's an autocracy, right? It's a family autocracy.
Autocracy, right.
It's
I believe.
Yeah, it's a form of family autocracy. So Xi, I don't know what his family dynamics are, but the thing is about communism is, because Rick talks about the system, the communist system is actually, people equal sharing of stuff, things. There's no system there. There is a single leader, and he will die. And what happens then is most likely someone more nefarious takes over, because they have to be more nefarious in order to take power from that existing person that died. There's unlikely someone, this is typically how it happens, it's likely someone that comes in and reforms it. They usually just say, oh, I can take that place and continue on with that mission. Because a lot of people in place within the government, just like there is within Russia with the FSB and the special security services in Russia, they already are lining their pockets. So as long as you can keep the status quo and you can enrich yourself, but as long as you enrich your pals below them, you end up having always more nefarious people come in. So there is no communist system in China. It is destined to fail into what every other autocracy becomes, is a more dictatorial type of society with your rights and more, what's the word? Discrimination against your population, depending on who votes for you or who supports you and who doesn't support you, right?
I wanted to ask Rick if he speaks Chinese, or if he's just gonna, or if he just speaks English and he's just gonna go there to live.
He's going to pick it up.
First of all, there's no such language as Chinese. It's either Mandarin or whatever.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Mandarin.
I'm uneducated.
Tabitha says, "Hey, if you have a computer, look up the rumor. Has it Trump signed?" Are you replying to someone else about the Epstein files?
Oh, yeah. I was going to bring that up earlier about, because I haven't seen the news all day. I've been in and out all day, so I haven't seen where we're at on the whole Epstein thing. Or are we even allowed to say that word on TikTok?
We usually just say E-list, even though I just said it as well.
Yeah. I was in a live the other day, and they're calling people, dropping F-bombs, calling people a bitch ass hoe and all this stuff, but yet you have to say unalive. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
You could probably say the N-word and get away with it.
What?
I would imagine.
Yeah, Tabitha says he signed it. Well, of course he signed it. He had no choice to sign it, right? He's been now supporting it for a couple days, for a whopping couple days.
Yeah, they're opening that investigation, so now they can use that as an excuse to not release the files because they're in the middle of a current investigation. Come on, people, wake up.
Yeah,
What is it, 20 victims? Was that what they said? 20 survivors or something? The females that were...
There's over 1,000 apparently.
Oh, there's over 1,000.
Well,
Apparently,
now,
only those ladies that have been standing up behind MTG and whatever, I think there's 23 of them or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but
they may take...
There's another topic of discussion. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not herself lately.
She had a come to Jesus moment.
She just got her head out of Trump's ass. That's
I need to go eat, but let's keep this one short. I've been wanting to do a video. I've been wanting to do a video on this one about MTG's sort of awakening. Here's a quick synopsis of what I think what's happening, and challenge me if you think otherwise, because obviously she's still MAGA. She readily claims that.
She denounced it today or yesterday.
Did she? She went on The View and said she still loves Trump. So come on, I don't trust her as far as I throw her.
It was a public interview, or what do they call that? The news. She had all the survivors behind her.
Yeah, a press conference.
A press conference. Well, she didn't denounce it, but she just said that she no longer identifies with it because
here's what I think is happening though. All right, Tabitha, thank you for putting us off track. We need a new topic, but I also have to go in a few minutes. So I think Marjorie Taylor Greene, obviously, she was a complete ignorant imbecile when she joined Congress. She was just white trash. She was clueless. She's not a very knowledgeable, let's say knowledgeable person. I won't say intelligence, whatever. Won't question her intelligence. She was always involved in conspiracy theories. She's always been an agitator. She's just not been a decent human being. However, she goes to Congress and she's now serving as a representative. She learns a lot. When you're in government, you learn a lot. You learn how government functions. But she's obviously a loyalist. So she's supporting Trump and she's blinded by her own views that align with MAGA and her conspiracies. And obviously she's very anti-is, right? She's always been very anti-is. That's going to come into play in a second. So I think obviously like anyone else, she's been learning things over the past 4 or 5 years, 5 years, last 5 years being in Congress. And she has obviously there came the moment with the e-files. And what she's realized is one, she's not a white male. Not a white male. So, okay, I've been supporting these guys, and all these guys are shysters. Clinton, Gates, all these people that have been on this list, they've been doing horrible things to young women. So maybe she had a little check of morality, like, oh, okay, and I'm not a white male. So start to question yourself, but you're still loyal MAGA. Then she realizes how much influence is happening within the Trump administration. And you guys know this from watching probably the videos about the three circles in the Venn diagram: the Silicon Valley billionaires, the dark MAGA mafia, the pro-is Zionists, and the Project 2025 WC nationalists. Now, I don't even think she understands how neat and tidy these things are. But she realizes she's not part of the billionaire class. She realized that these Silicon Valley billionaires, these AI companies, she's not them. She's also anti-is, always has been. You could probably call her an anti-Semite as well. I think she might be that. So she's not that. She sees how much influence they have. And she's also not a WC nationalist. Even though you might think that maybe she would be a supporter of that. But I think she realizes Project 2025, even though she probably doesn't hate everything about it, she's not on the in club, right? She's just being used like Trump is with that organization to sort of disrupt things. So I think she's been sort of coming to a sort of awakening and realize that she's been a piece of shit. And this e-files has allowed her to take the high road. And she started to get a lot of widespread support for taking that high road. And she enjoyed that. It's like, oh, I'm not hated by everybody. Actually, MAGA supports this. And now these other people are actually giving me kudos. And this is like, oh, I think I'm on the right track. So she's had that come to Jesus movement, a moment, realizing that maybe she doesn't have to be such a shittard and such a distractor.
Well, I think maybe I think it's hard for people in there to find their group, find their people that are, that are similar.
And she doesn't
Because
have people. That's my point. I don't think she has people. She's not
Right.
in a group there. She's like an outcast. And she's starting to realize that.
There's a silent majority in America that is none of these things that you listed. And they outnumber everyone else. It's just that we have to come up with our own movement and who we are, our identity.
Yeah, and like Tabitha says here, she likes the spotlight. So now she's getting a lot of extra spotlight, which if she wants to run for Senate and she's sort of turned a new leaf, she's still going to get the support of a lot of right people. So all she has to do is sort of pivot a little bit back to MAGA at some point. And all of a sudden when you're so freaking crazy and then all of a sudden you start to have moments of normalization, people start to think that you're going to be normal. She doesn't have to be normal. She just has to be perceived as, oh, maybe she actually has some decency and some clarity, but she's still not a good human being. I would view if someone is turning a new leaf, just because they've turned a new leaf for 2 months, you better show me like 5 or 10 years of history before I judge that you actually have changed your character.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, you can see it though. I mean, you can tell. You've said it on here. You can tell who someone is within seconds, TK.
Right.
You said that.
I don't know. She's a wolf in sheep's clothing, man. She's opportunistic and she wants to run for Senate, like TK says, and she's going to do whatever she thinks is in her best interest to move her in the direction she wants to go. So maybe I'm being cynical, but I
You might
don't
be
know.
right.
Yeah, I think I think she's a
This is the
narcissist.
same.
Yeah.
This is the same person who thought that there was such a thing as Jewish space lasers. Okay, starting the fires in California. So come on, and that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. She never did say it, I think, but she did promote, like, I think on Twitter and so forth. So, yeah, my point is it just like, I think she might be having some moments of decency.
Maybe,
Might,
maybe.
but it also could be like you said, Noah. I think it should just be opportunistic, and she's on an issue that she feels like she's an island on. That's also giving her a tremendous amount of spotlight and support. And this taking the high road on this one issue, does that change her fundamentally in the future? It's a long time to be seen whether that's
We'll
true or
see.
not.
We'll see. But I think she's coming to the realization, as is a lot of people, because it's all over. People are saying it. If you know where to look, there's a lot of people saying MAGA is dead. They're a sinking ship, and the rats are leaving. So,
Well,
I don't know.
there is a lot of, I need to do more research on the Heritage Foundation is having a lot of internal strife at the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025. There's a lot of problems internally. So I'll have to do a video on that in the future as well.
Okay, sounds
Davies'
good.
comment was what I was going to mention on.
Secret Space Force does not have space lasers, SSB, old tech, wake up.
Does have.
Anyway, guys, I got to jump out of here. I got a list of phone calls I got to make before it gets too much later. But thank you so much for bringing me. I enjoyed myself a lot this evening.
I did as well. Thanks for having, I appreciate you being here, Noah, and for the comments and the videos and so forth. Appreciate you guys.
I'll look forward to the next one. Oh, and before I go, I wanted to suggest an outro that you might check out. I don't know if you know who Bill Hicks was. He was a very good comedian, but he does a little bit called "It's Just a Ride." See, you can find it on YouTube. It might. I think you might like it for one of your new outros.
I love the outro suggestions. Yes. I like having more, the better.
Right. All right, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, Noah.
Take care.
See you next time.
Can you hear that? No,
I'm going to.
you don't hear that, right?
I do.
Hear that? Oh, okay. So that is playing through the computer. Okay. I'll check it out later. Thanks, Mr. Global. Appreciate you. Yeah, hopping off.
Appreciate you. We'll see it.
Tabitha, thanks for being here as whenever you can. That's awesome. I love seeing you here. And everybody else, I know the audience has waned and we got way off topic, but that's how it goes here on this show. We're all over the place. Last outro today, we're going to do the Joe Pesci one. This one is short, so thanks everybody hanging in there. I just have one request. I'm trying to do a lot of videos. Editing is not my strong suit. I'm having a lot of problems getting more traction on YT, but I just need to continue. If someone ever knows anyone that needs to be having intern, that wants to be involved in what I'm trying to do here, if you happen to know anybody, I'm going to start to look for an editor so that I can do more videos and have someone to help me make the videos better, because ultimately the videos get the most reach. Tabitha, YouTube is hard. I have a lot of experience, believe it or not, on YouTube. One of my companies that I owned had 500 million views on YouTube. That was prior to 2014, and I've actually done successful on something else on YouTube. But it is hard when it comes to politics, but I just need to be more consistent. And I'm going to be looking for an editor, like an intern editor. I don't know how I'm going to pay them yet, but I will figure out a way to get that done. So if you happen to know anybody that's interested in being involved in helping me out with some editing, that's probably the first step that I need to go towards, because I need to make sure some of the videos that have been doing really well on TikTok need to get exposed on IG, YT, Reddit, Substack. I also eventually need a writer as well. So I'm going to ask for that at the end, just see if anyone knows anyone. Maybe it comes from the audience here. And of course, we'll see what happens over time. Anyway, so Joe Pesci is the closing of the show today. This is a Joe Pesci moment from a movie. I don't even know what the movie's called. So listen to this one. And thanks everybody for watching. And I will see you guys tomorrow.
Which door do I leave from?
At Harvard, we don't end our sentences with prepositions.
Well, in that case, which door do I leave from, asshole?
What democratic eloquence!
You asked the question, sir. Let me answer it. The genius of the Constitution is that it can always be changed. The genius of the Constitution is that it makes no permanent rule other than its faith in the wisdom of ordinary people to govern themselves.
Faith in the wisdom of the people is exactly what makes the Constitution incomplete and crude.
No, sir. Our founding parents were pompous, middle-aged white farmers, but they were also great men because they knew one thing that all great men should know, that they didn't know everything. They knew they were going to make mistakes, but they made sure to leave a way to correct them. They didn't think of themselves as leaders. They wanted a government of citizens, not royalty. A government of listeners, not lecturers. A government that could change, not stand still. The president isn't an elected king, no matter how many bombs he can drop, because the crude Constitution doesn't trust him. He's a servant of the people. He's a bum, okay, Mr. Pitcairn? He's just a bum. And the only bliss that he's searching for is freedom and justice.